Okay, members, thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, members of the public and the press attending this full council meeting of BCP Council on the 12th of July 2022. I'm Councillor Nigel Hedges, and as Chair of BCP Council, I will be chairing the meeting. I will be supported by my Vice Chair, Councillor Tony O'Neill. I will now set out the housekeeping arrangements for the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand clearly to indicate. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is any dissension. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands unless a recorded vote is requested, which requires support from a quarter of the members present at the meeting. For the purpose of the meeting, the wearing of masks is a personal choice. As a matter of courtesy, can members indicate to me if they are leaving the meeting? I propose to have comfort breaks at 2-hour intervals as appropriate. In addition, I would request that you try and avoid leaving the meeting during the debate. At the start of each full council meeting, I take the opportunity to remind members of the requirements of the BCP Council Constitution, Procedure Rules and the Councillors' Code of Conduct. However, high passions run during debate, and I will still, as the chairperson in charge of the meeting, expect councillors to behave with moderation and courtesy towards one another, to officers and the chair throughout. I expect you to be fair and to considerate to your fellow members of this council, as I am entrusted by you to be fair to all. When asking to speak, please indicate clearly. Please indicate to the chair if you wish or need to temporarily leave the meeting. I will allow comfort breaks at reasonable intervals. This indication is especially important if you do not plan to return, so that this can be noted when voting is done. Points of order, if properly made by reference to the provision in the Constitution, will be heard and determined immediately. I reluctantly employ the gavel when I am not being heard. While I understand that councillors may get swept away in the heat of a given moment, my primary role is to allow council business to be done, and I will use the further option of muting all microphones if I deem necessary. As a last resort, I will stand as the chair in order to halt proceedings and regain order, but these are not actions I would like to consider, let alone feel obliged to employ. I ask members to think long and hard about these sentiments. I would also request that members leave the meeting at the actual end of the meeting when I have clearly indicated as such. Agenda item 1, apologies. Monitoring officer, will you please read out the apologies received for this meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Hazel Allen, Councillor Lewis Allison, Councillor Simon Bull, Councillor George Farquhar, Councillor Peter Hall, Councillor Mark Howell, Councillor Bob Lawton, who has sent apologies as he's on mayoral engagement, Councillor Chris Matthews, Councillor Mark Robson, and Councillor Tony Trent, who is also on a mayoral engagement. In addition, Chairman, I've been advised that Councillor Maidment will be late arriving this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Sice. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Monitoring officer, can you report on any declarations of interest received?
If any member is required to make any other declaration of interest, we've received none for this evening, but if any member is required to make any other declaration of interest, please could you refer to the flow chart at the front of the agenda or make these during the meeting. Thank you.
I think we have do we have a declaration of interest?
Yep, if you may, Chair, I'm a director on Future Places and received a dispensation to proceed in the meeting from the Chief Executive. Thank you, as I believe the Deputy Leader has as well.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you. Also an unpaid Director of Future Places on behalf of the Council, and again have received dispensation. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, do you agree to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of April 2022, which was reconvened on the 10th of May 2022, the extraordinary council meeting on 10th of May 2022, the annual council meeting on the 10th of May 2022, and the extraordinary council meeting on the 21st of June 2020? Any dissension from the minutes? Confirming the minutes. Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, I had my hand raised before you asked for that. A point of accuracy on page 21 of the pack. I raised the issue of how the highway network gridlocks with roadworks or a single incident. There's the word not been inserted on the second line, which completely negates what I said. So for a point of accuracy, that word not needs to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you. Just a minor typo, I think. Councillor Dedman did not ask for help and succour for Ukrainian refugees on page 39. Succour.
Thank you. No other alterations needed. Right, thank you. Confirmed that the minutes are agreed by consensus of the meeting. Agenda item 4, announcements and introductions from the Chairman. It is my sad duty to inform you that Councillor Nick Geary passed away on Friday. Nick Geary was first elected to Christchurch Borough Council in 1999 until 2003, representing the Portfield ward, and was subsequently re-elected in 2007 until 2019, representing the North Highcliffe and Walkford ward. Councillor Geary successfully stood for election to BCP Council in May 2019, as well as the newly established Highcliffe and Walkford Parish Council in the same year. Councillor Geary was elected as Mayor for Christchurch twice, in 2010 and 2017. Councillor Brooks, I understand you wish to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was with immense sadness that I learned a few days ago of Councillor Nick Geary's passing. Nick and I were both elected to serve on BCP Council at its inception in 2019 for the Highcliffe and Walkford ward. As a long-standing Christchurch councillor, Nick had considerable knowledge and understanding of the area and the residents he served. Nick was an accomplished engineer, and when I told him my late father was also an engineer and I was a surveyor, we gained an immediate rapport and understanding on many technical issues. As I was a newbie councillor, Nick was most gracious with his time, helping me to find my feet in the ward and sharing the background on many issues. I very much appreciated his kindness and his empathy with our residents. Nick will be sadly missed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Flagg, I understand you requested to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, members of the Council, it was with great sadness that I learned of the death of my friend and colleague, Councillor Nick Geary. Nick and myself were elected in 1999, and apart from a brief interlude, Nick has served the residents of Christchurch for 19 years. He was elected as Mayor of the ancient borough of Christchurch on 2 occasions, an achievement that he was very proud of, and it was my privilege to propose him for the position in 2017. Nick was a man of the highest principles and integrity and was respected by residents, fellow councillors and officers. He was the Community Services Chairman for a number of years in Christchurch. He provided me with great support and encouragement during the latter years of Christchurch Borough Council. He was passionate about the needs of our young people and was a great supporter of the youth organisation in Highcliffe, where he served as a long-standing member of the management committee. He was very proud that during his mayoralty year, he brought the portrait painting of Admiral John Edward Walcott, CB MP, back from Bournemouth to the Christchurch Civic offices. Nick was a well-known businessman and was the owner of a thriving bespoke engineering company based in the town. We spent many a time chatting over his passion for classic cars and motorcycles and his love for grandfather clocks. Nick was a keen sailor and would often be found aboard his motorboat or even sailing his dinghy in Christchurch Harbour. As past mayors, Nick and me joined our time rehearsing and singing at the annual carols with the Mayor concert in the Priory. At social events, Nick was always very eager to show off his talents on the acoustic guitar, and I have great memories of his renditions of 7 Drunken Nights and The Streets of London. More recently, Nick suffered from ill health. All in Christchurch will sadly miss Nick, and we send our condolences to Gillian and the family. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. Were there any other members who wish to pay tribute? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Flagg. Right, we will now have a period of respectful silence following the sad passing of Councillor Nick Geary. Please be upstanding. Thank you, members. I would like to take the opportunity to refer to some of the engagements that I have attended since the last council meeting. I've attended the Jubilee service at Sherborne Abbey. I have had meetings with the Chief Executive of the Dorset Community Foundation. I've visited the Well Cafe in Boscombe Royal Arcade with Councillor Jane Kelly. I've had a meeting with the leader of BCP Council in the Old Town Hall in Christchurch with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor of Christchurch and the Christchurch Town Council Town Clerk. I attended a Jubilee tree planting ceremony on behalf of the Soroptimists at St Peter's School, Iford, with the Lord Lieutenant of Dorset. I also attended a Jubilee tree planting ceremony on behalf of the Soroptimists at Poole High School, again with the Lord Lieutenant of Dorset. I've attended the morning service for the South Atlantic Medal Association in Christchurch. I attended the evening dinner for the South Atlantic Medal Association in Christchurch on the same day. I attended the High Sheriff of Dorset's summer party at Durlston Castle. I opened the Born Free event at Merrick Park. I attended the Christchurch Town Council rededication service at Christchurch Priory. And I attended and spoke at the Remembering Srebrenica event in this chamber on Friday. It was 27 years since the genocide in Srebrenica, and it's something that gives us all a perspective and something we have to focus on at that particular point. Thank you. Agenda item 5, public issues. Please note that the time for questions, statements and petitions from the members of the public shall normally commence immediately after the item declarations of interest on the agenda for the meeting and shall be restricted to a total of 15 minutes. Although at the discretion of the Chair of the Council or the Chair of the meeting, this time may be extended. Where a question to which an answer is to be given is not reached within the time limit, a written answer shall be provided to the questioner within 2 working days of the meeting and a copy emailed to all councillors. So, public questions. Hilary Trott has submitted a public question on disabled parking. Would you like to ask your question and Councillor Mike Green will respond? It looks as though that microphone wasn't working at that time, because that question won't appear on the live stream. So we may ask her to repeat it with a functioning microphone, please. Thank you. While we're sorting out the technical issue with the microphone, under the Constitution, no political banners are allowed to be displayed in the council chamber. It's been drawn to my attention that there is one in the gallery. Respectfully, as chair of this meeting, could I ask that to be removed, please? I'd greatly appreciate it if you could do that. Thank you. There's two. Thank you.
Right. That's better. I can hear myself.
Hello.
Hi. Why does the council think they can redefine disabled parking? The law is that disabled bays need space all round. It is not solely for wheelchair users, who naturally do need this. Those with any limited mobility also need the side space so we can open the car door fully, enabling egress and re-entry. The spaces in the first bay in the south car park by AFCB's ground do not all have this facility, so cannot be called spaces for the disabled. If I used one of these spaces, I would be trapped in the car. They are not legal.
Thank you, Mr. Trott. Councillor Green, I understand you will be responding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Council does not think that it can redefine disabled parking and is fully aware of the need to provide clear space all around. Guidance is that disabled access parking spaces should be 2.4 metres by 4.8 metres, with a 1.2 metre wide marked access zone between spaces and a 1.2 metre zone for boot access. I'd like to thank Ms Trott for highlighting that there was an issue with the first of the 14 disabled bays in the row at the northern end of the car park, which did not have a sufficiently wide access zone on the left-hand side. The other 13 bays were fully compliant. On receipt of Ms Trott's message, the parking team inspected the location and ordered alterations to the markings within the car park to ensure that this end also had the required access zone on both sides of it. This work has been completed. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. The next two questions were from Zoe Keeping, who has been unable to be present in the council chamber. So when someone asking questions cannot attend on the evening, then the answers to both her questions will be provided in writing. Right. So, Mr. Freeman. I do apologise. Mr. Freeman, I understand you've been selected to ask a question. Thank you. Please go ahead.
On the 19th of January 2021, BCP Council were granted planning permission to demolish the existing park building in Churchill Gardens and erect a community cafe building. We asked the head of planning to remove the condition to demolish the existing park building within 2 months of the new building being open to the public that was applied to the grant of planning, on the basis that it is no longer relevant or reasonable. Churchill Gardens cannot afford to lose such a valuable community resource that has the potential to be repurposed to serve the community as a sustainable living centre under community management.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Dove, I understand you'll be responding.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Freeman, for coming along at such short notice, and we hope that Ms. Keeping is feeling well soon. Thank you for the request and bringing this to my attention. Just to note that the head of planning nor any other officer is unable to unilaterally remove planning conditions without an application being first made. But we have discussed this through, and in order to facilitate the matter through the correct procedure, the planning department would very much like to consider and understand the request through a pre-application inquiry. The local planning authority then will be able to consider not only the planning merits of the proposed retention in the building, but also the positive community value that this building can bring. So the planning merits will be taken into consideration, along with any potential use, future use and funding for that building as a community asset. and we would request, therefore, that the Parks Department, who own this facility, are contacted so that together the pre-application could be made.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Zoe Keeping's second question, would Mr Freeman be prepared to read that out for us as well, please? And the Leader of the Council will respond.
Yes. Will Bournemouth Youth Services, who own the building, grant the Friends of Churchill Gardens a lease to occupy the existing park building on the same terms as currently offered to the Coastline Vineyard Church, i.e. rent-free, if it is possible to prevent the demolition of the building? I think what it's saying is, if the building isn't demolished, could the Bournemouth Youth Service have a lease?
Thank you, Mr Freeman. Councillor Mellor.
I believe Councillor Kelly is responding, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Apologies for the confusion there. Thank you very much, Mr Freeman, for asking this question. And as Councillor Dove has said, I do hope that Mrs Keeping is feeling better very quickly. So in answer to your question, the Aspire project is a European regional development funded project, working with partners across southern England and northern France. In BCP, we were awarded funding for a new community hub in Churchill Gardens and funding to support activities around health and well-being and growing, cooking and eating in a healthy way. As part of the project, consultation was undertaken on the location of the new building and wider feedback around local residents' view on the park. A park master plan was developed with the local community that encompassed the whole area. We welcome any interest from the community to engage with us about the management of community facilities, but until such time as we have seen a detailed proposal from the group, it will be inappropriate for us to comment on any individual building. The Council needs to be able to satisfy itself that any group taking on a facility will do so with the intention of continuing to invest in it and the community that it serves. Members will be interested to know that the Council has made funding of £115,000 available to replace the current play area and support new landscaping of this area, further helping to transform Churchill Gardens into a modern, accessible, high-quality space for everyone to enjoy. I'm pleased to announce that plans for the new play area will be developed over the autumn and construction is timetabled for the winter and early spring. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, to responding to that particular question. Thank you. Alex McKinstry has submitted a public question on future places. Would you like to ask your question, Mr McKinstry, and the Leader of the Council will respond.
Thank you, Councillor Strip. Hello, am I audible? No, splendid. Future Places. Confirmed earlier this year, they were looking to appoint 3 independent, non-executive directors. It sounded promising. A recruitment agency was involved, and one of the directors would be taking over from the deputy leader as independent chair of the company. I've since read the company minutes from the 24th of March, which state that due to the recruitment agency's limited reach, board members, quote, would reach out personally to inform suitable candidates of the opening, unquote. To what extent then will the leader and deputy leader of the council, both board members, be involved in the selecting and hiring of these independent non-executive directors?
Thank you, Mr McKinstry. Leader of the Council will respond.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Mr McKinstry. Good to see you again. I can confirm a recruitment agency, Berwick Partners, has been appointed to manage this process of the advertising and selection of BCP Future Places Chair and Non-Exec Director roles. The opportunity has been advertised on the agency website and a variety of other websites such as The Guardian, LinkedIn, Women on Boards, nonexecutivedirectors.com and the Ned Exchange to ensure that the widest possible reach. The opportunities are attracting strong interest from a diverse range of high-calibre applicants, and we are confident of being able to appoint suitably experienced independent candidates to the company board. The closing date for applications was the 8th of July. The appointment of any director, including non-executive directors, or the appointment of a chair are reserved matters under the shareholders' agreement. Therefore, full council approval will be required to be sought. As previously intended, upon the appointment of these independent directors, this would allow myself and the Deputy Leader to step down as directors after completion of the successful launch of Future Places. This will leave Future Places in the hands of one of the most capable, regeneration and stewardship-focused executive and director teams in the country. You'll be glad for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are perceived to be leading the way nationally on regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Katie Cousins has submitted a public question on children's services. Is Katie Cousins actually in the building? My understanding is that she's not. Okay, well in this case, Councillor White will respond to the question in writing. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, to interrupt, it's actually myself who will be responding. I do have the response here and have already forwarded it to Democratic Services.
I really wasn't very clear, Councillor Green, on what you said there. Sorry.
Apologies, Chairman. I'm responding to this question.
Okay.
It's not Councillor White, it's to do with an education function.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Thank you. So, Section B, statements. Susan Chapman has a statement she wishes to make on the climate emergency. Sorry, do we have an indication?
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chairman. With respect, there's an awful... Because the mics have been turned up a bit, we're getting a bit of an echo now, and it's difficult. It's difficult to hear. It's not so loud. Could they be tweaked down a bit? Because I'm sure everybody can hear me echoing.
We have anticipated this tweaking that's required. Mr. Jones will now disappear upstairs in a safe and orderly manner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful.
Us.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
I think it may be possible for us to continue in the meantime, so as long as the feedback isn't too bad. Okay, we will have to hold. Okay, right. Now, are we getting any feedback at the moment from my microphone? Councillor Butt, would you like to respond?
No feedback from yours. Are you getting any feedback from mine? I probably have the loudest voice in the chamber. No?
Sounds
okay,
clear.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Okay. Right, so Susan Chapman has a statement she wishes to make on the climate emergency. She has confirmed that she would like her statement read out, so I will call on the Director of Finance to read it out, please. Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Statement from Susan Chapman. Evidence-based presentations were given throughout the COVID crisis. Given the very visible, international, escalating threats to well-being as the world of nature continues to be sacrificed to deadly industries, Sir Patrick Ballance's MP briefing should be conveyed to all councillors, officers and to the public so everyone can best brace themselves for the baked-in chaos ahead. Angus Rose's 37-day climate hunger strike has not yet reached the parts other briefings reach. Preparation for reduced harvests, self-reliant clean energy, for limited salvaged resources and for climate migration is essential. A public information programme is well overdue.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Philip Stanley Watts has a statement he wishes to make on National Cut the Clutter on Our Streets Week. I will now call on Philip Stanley Watts to read out his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairman.
This week is National Cut the Clutter on Our Streets Week. Our pavements should be accessible to all, which is not the case for some of our streets in the BCP area. Poorly placed bins and A-boards and excessive signage, badly parked vehicles and barrel bikes. Accidents happen, it's hazardous for pedestrians. I should know as I broke my collarbone whilst out jogging, falling over some of the signage. There needs to be a BCP task and finish group to look into the clutter in our streets.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley Watts. Philip Gattrell has a statement he wishes to make on the contravention of law report. He has confirmed that he would like his question to be read out, so I will call on the Director of Finance to read it, please. Mr. Richards.
Report by Monitoring Officer, MO, concerning substantially incorrect information originally published for allowances and expenses payments to members and co-optees 2019-20 and 2020-21 in contravention of Regulation 15.3 of Local Authorities Member Allowances England Regulations 2003. Attention is drawn to revised information and accompanying information notes shown on the Council's website regarding the above. The revisions followed a forensic examination concerning substantial inaccuracies in amounts and categories I had notified, including by public issue and at Audit and Governance meeting on the 3rd of February 2022. The MO is taking advice as she is under this contravention of law requires obligatory reporting to members under the Local Government and Housing Act of 1989. However, the facts of the matter unquestionably warrant the MO's report to comply with the 1989 Act, given the nature and extent of the original misleading information. Hence, also this statement for general awareness.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Patricia Williamson has a statement she wishes to make on the BPAS buffer zone. I will now call on Patricia Williamson to read out her statement.
If a buffer zone is created at Ophir Road, and if politely offering an information leaflet is called intimidation and harassment, then we cannot offer a pregnant woman a real choice. That is the alternative option of support to keep her baby, when she may have been coerced and does not really want it killed. If silent prayer is criminalised, then clearly the power of prayer is recognised. I now appeal to you in the name of Jesus Christ, who loves these mothers and their babies. I appeal to you to allow us to try, even at the last minute, to save babies and their mothers from the trauma of abortion.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Section C, petitions. I would like to report that a petition has been received in accordance with the Constitution that will be dealt with under Agenda Item 6. Following the publication of the agenda, a further verification of additional sheets has taken place. I can now report that there is a revised total of 3,395 valid signatures on the petition. Agenda Item 6, petition. Stop women being harassed and intimidated outside the Ophir Road abortion clinic. I would like to set out the following, which will be the process for dealing with the petition. I will call on Jess Bone from Sister Supporter, petition organiser, to present the petition, not exceeding 3 minutes. I will then open the debate on the petition, which may include questions of the petition organiser. No proposals will be permitted until the close of the debate on the petition. Right of reply from petition organiser. Jess Bone has indicated that Polly Jackman would like to speak with regards to the right of reply and answer any questions raised by councillors, not exceeding 3 minutes. At this point, Ms Syce, the monitoring officer, will make a statement. Ms Syce.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I just thought it would be worthwhile as the legal officer for the authority to make everybody aware before this petition is heard that there has been a portfolio holder decision taken by the administration of this authority to begin a consultation on 3 of the issues most pertinent to this particular situation. That decision record has been published. It's available on the website to be seen. And so I just wanted to say that anything councillors may debate in the chamber tonight, please be mindful that it doesn't jeopardise any outcome of that consultation, because, of course, if views are held that appear that you may have made up your mind before the end of the petition and the consultation is taken into account, that may jeopardise the process of that consultation. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Syce. I will now invite Jess Bone from Sister Supporter to present the petition.
Hello, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole councillors. My name is Jess Bone and I am speaking to you today as a proud Bournemouth resident to present a petition that has been signed by more than 4,000 people. This is my colleague, Polly Jackman from Sister Supporter. The petition calls for the council to take action to prevent anti-choice harassment outside the BPAS abortion clinic on Ophir Road. I'm very pleased to have heard this morning that the council has said that it will be launching a consultation on options for a proposed public space protection order. My hope is that this will not only protect women accessing the clinic, but it will also ensure that people living near the clinic no longer have to witness harassment on a daily basis. The BPAS clinic provides safe abortions for any woman or pregnant person who decides this is the best option for their lives and their bodies. This is a completely legal service performed under strict NHS supervision, no different from a GP surgery or a dentist. And yet the clinic has been subjected to decades of grotesque and abusive behaviour by anti-abortion hate groups. These stories date back some 40 years. Since 2017, the clinic staff have gathered more than 500 impact statements from patients who have suffered harassment from anti-abortion groups. To be accessing healthcare while a group insists on witnessing your arrival, denying your privacy, praying for your soul and your pregnancy, attempting to dissuade you from having an abortion, handing you and your companion leaflets full of medical disinformation is incredibly distressing. On your tables, you should have evidence packs containing images of this antisocial behaviour. The more concerning activity includes referring to patients as murderers and following staff to their cars. Shamed, intimidated, guilty and traumatised, these are words that crop up time and time again in the impact statements gathered by the clinic. We wouldn't tolerate this obscene behaviour outside Royal Bournemouth Hospital, so we all have to ask ourselves, what makes this any different? Over the last few months, Sister Supporter has been raising awareness of this issue throughout the local community, and we have been heartened by the scale of the support that we have received. We aimed to collect 2,000 signatures, but in the end, we collected over double that, exceeding 4,000 signatures, with 3,395 having been verified by the council. People have a right to live and to access medical services without harassment. It's a simple ask with a clear answer. Thousands of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole residents are asking for you to protect the BPAS clinic. They will be listening carefully for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open the debate on the petition. Please indicate. Dove.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the speakers we've heard and to those who are taking part in this democratic process this evening. And as both the Chairman and the Council's monitoring officer have stated, this matter is part of a legal process that the Council is undertaking, and for this reason I will be very careful about the words I'm using. I do understand it's a very emotive topic, but I'd like to ensure that tonight's debate doesn't undermine this legal process or identifies any one councillor as having predetermined thoughts on this matter. Unlike the states, and then looking at the wording of this petition, this isn't a debate about abortion. That's been had, it's a legal activity. It's not a debate about pro-life or pro-choice. It's about whether behaviours could give way to people feeling harassed, alarmed or distressed. Be that the mothers attending clinics, partners or friends supporting mothers, staff at the clinic and or residents in the area. This has already been evaluated upon by independent counsel upon reviewing evidence collated, and I say this very clearly so that we do not undermine this legal process. So Chair, thank you for allowing me to respond and also set out the activities of the council so far. As portfolio holder for community safety, I became aware of the concerns relating to BPAS clinic in December 2021. We've worked with officers, police, stakeholders since then to understand issues and consider all of the options in order to reach a resolution. The issues related to protesting outside the clinic do predate my time, and it's fair to say that these concerns relating to activity outside the clinic are long-standing. However, as a result of the work achieved by our ASB team since becoming portfolio holder, we do now have the evidence which external legal counsel have confirmed could support the implementation of a public spaces protection order. This would be subject to public consultation, and to be clear, the PSPO in this instance could mean a buffer zone around the clinic. We have continued to engage with both pro-life and pro-choice groups, and as a step within this legal process, we are currently in negotiations with all parties to see if there's a possibility of an agreement for the introduction of a safe zone. A safe zone is an area designated to permit a limited number of people to protest with strict conditions restricting their activities. This negotiation is currently ongoing, but it does not prevent us from considering all the options available to use the legislation in the beginning of a public consultation for the options of a potential PSPO if this is considered to be the best outcome. A number of conflicting views have been received as a result of the negotiations, and indications are that an agreement will not be reached despite us extending this negotiation period. So therefore, I have taken the decision to proceed with public consultation on whether PSPO should be implemented, and this will be launched on the 20th of July for 6 weeks. The consultation will present the concerns raised, summarise the evidence, and set out the options available, and it will consider 3 options should a PSPO be supported. These would be to exclude all protesting within a defined geographical area around the clinic, to exclude all protesting within a defined geographical area around the clinic, but to include a permitted area with protesters to gather without any restrictions on their activities in that designated area. Or the third option is to exclude all protesting with a defined geographical area around the clinic, but to include a permitted area for protesters to gather, which carefully limits the activity within 2 designated areas. Following completion of the public consultation, a further analysis of the options and results of the consultation will be undertaken. A decision on how to proceed at that time will be made by 16th of September. Consultation will be widely publicised. All full details will of course be available, and we will conduct leaflet drops and engage with the local community during this period. This decision was published by myself yesterday, and I hope therefore it reassures those who have taken the time to either sign petitions, to write to us, or who made statements here tonight and have an interest in this matter, that the Council is considering all of its options and moving forward to find a resolution, including the commencement of this consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. I thought that was most important, that all that was delivered, so I gave you dispensation for the extra minute or 2. Thank you. Contributions to the debate on the petition, please. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I'd originally tabled a motion to Council to acknowledge the 3,395 people who had signed the Sister Supporter petition and asked this Council to agree to a public consultation on ending the harassment and the intimidation that has affected people accessing services and staff at the BPAS clinic on Ophir Road for years. Despite a growing evidence base, I think it's fair to say that process has been somewhat slow, whilst I was out campaigning, it's become very clear to me that the impact of the protesters outside the clinic is far-reaching and a resolution is long overdue. Women shared stories with me of how they had been intimidated, made to feel guilt or shame when accessing legal health services. And many others signed the petition because they understood that harassment and intimidation is not acceptable in any form. Council has a duty to respond to these complaints, and I'm really pleased that Councillor Dove has made her decision to put these options out to public consultation. And I thank her and the officers who have got us to this point. Therefore, taking on board the warning the monitoring officer and the portfolio holder have given, I'm happy to withdraw and not move the motion now that the right decision has been made, and ask for Councillor Lewis's seconder to agree. And I'm looking forward to the official consultation, which will then inform what this council does next.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. We have slightly gone out of order, Councillor Earl, but I think I will now at this point ask full council to agree to your withdrawal of your motion. Do we have a consensus? Agreement to withdraw? Thank you. So now we can continue the debate on the petition. Those who would like to contribute, please indicate. There are no indications. Okay, so at this point we need somebody to propose our next point of action to refer it to a further to refer it to a next meeting.
No, Chairman, it's just whatever response the council wishes to make to the petition.
Okay.
I was giving you an example.
Thank you. Can I ask for a response from the council to the petition? Councillor Stribley.
Chairman, I heard what's been said and that the matter is to go out for public consultation. I personally am slightly bemused by that. If one is accessing proper legal health services, one should not be harassed under any circumstances whatsoever. And whilst I do understand there are different points of view over the matter of abortion, they are very strongly held one way or the other. But quite frankly, if we believe that people accessing this service for whatever need they have for it should be able to do so quietly and uninterrupted, then I would think this council should be able to make a very prompt decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. I think Councillor Dove indicated first, then Councillor Green.
Cool, thank you. Chairman, if I understand you're looking for a resolution that we can offer those who have come and presented the petition tonight. In that case, may I suggest that we thank Councillor Millie Earl for her support at bringing this to my attention, and that as a council we endorse the portfolio holder decision published on the 11th of July 2022 to go to consultation for the introduction of the PSPO with one of the three following options within that decision, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman.
You may sit down if there's an issue.
I'd be very happy to second that resolution should those wording be acceptable.
Thank you. So can I ask for a vote on those proposals, please? And that will be the response to petition. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Thank you, members. Agenda item 7, recommendations from Cabinet, the Leader and other committees. Council is asked to consider the recommendations which will be taken separately as set out on the agenda. I would like to highlight that there are some decisions on some of these issues which have been taken under delegated powers by the relevant bodies and are therefore not before the Council. Item 7A, Cabinet 25th of May 2022, minute number 7, Harbourside Park Strategic Infrastructure Improvements to the sluice channel linking Poole Park and Poole Harbour. Councillor Anderson, I understand that you will move the recommendations and then for Councillor Gabriel to second the move. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, this is a piece of kit that is too old and has been serving the Council too long. It was introduced in the 60 years ago and has served us well in that time, but unfortunately, the channel is falling to bits. If we don't replace the channel, we will not be able to open the sluice gates. If we can't open the sluice gates, we will end up with a stagnant pool of water, salt water in the place of the Poole Lagoon. And if we have that, that will eventually end up with a salt marsh, which will be of detriment to all the residents around the area and to all the residents of Poole and the greater BCP Council. It will also involve the splitting of the Beta Park from Whitecliffe and closing of those walkways and cycleways through there and splitting the two areas. So I would propose, Chairman, that we agree the money and proceed with the work as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Gabriel, I understand you...
Second.
Thank you. Any members wish to indicate to speak on this, please? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I know that wasn't for me. I welcome this work on my ward boundary and the opportunity to better manage the sluice and the water quality in the park. I have just returned from Cumbria, and at Ravenglass there's a Roman bathhouse still standing 2,000 years old. I note that the Victorian bricks are part of the sluice, which is over 100 years old, is still functional, yet the 1960s work has failed. So I wonder what quality we are building to and what the anticipated life of this investment is, please. I am concerned about the use of the determination that it's SIL rather than other capital funds that are funding this. This is maintenance, as the portfolio holder said. It's been there 60 years and it's not been maintained. Whilst we're given the wording to justify it, I think that's a stretch, because the wording says that the levy can be used to increase the capacity of existing infrastructure or to repair failing existing infrastructure if that is necessary to support the development, which I don't think it is in this case. It seems that SIL has just been taken as the easy answer to many capital schemes, denying the improvements in community infrastructure that it's really intended for. I regret the uncertainties over solving the Keyhole Bridge drainage issue. The Council should know whether it's Wessex Water or our responsibility or a shared one and coordinate the works together. I do hope that it will be pursued with vigour to ensure that Wessex Water are not digging it up as soon as we've completed our works. This sluice channel is at the confluence of 4 paths for walking and cycling, plus a narrow area between the 2 parks, between Beta and Whitecliffe, again as the portfolio has indicated. This is very heavily used, especially by dog walkers. Whilst I'd generally be keen on open channels, this is really not the place. It will create a location of significant conflict. At worst, any bridge or ducting needs to be significantly wider than the paths either side in order to share the load. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown, I think you indicated next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very similar to Councillor Hadley, actually. I fully support the work and the replacement and repair of this sluice gate as a regular user of Poole Park. But I note from the report that the request for this funding was originally made to the Council's Futures Fund in November 2021, but that request was redirected to making a SIL application for the funding. And I know the report says the Head of Planning advises SIL is appropriate, but I do have some concerns about using that funding stream for this project. I know in the legal summary on the report, it talks about the explanation of what SIL can be spent on. I think we've approved SIL funding many times in this council chamber, but I don't ever recall seeing the full statement verbatim of what SIL can be spent on. And I wonder if that's put in this report because it's recognised that this is a bit of a grey area and this is a borderline issue as to whether this is appropriate for SIL funding, because we don't normally have that wording given to us. I do struggle to see how replacement of a failed sluice gate at a cost of £1.2 million either supports development in the area or mitigates the impact of development going on in the area. SIL is not a bottomless pit of funds, and using £1.2 million for a failed sluice gate may be at the expense of other schemes such as schools, hospitals, health and social care facilities, play areas, open spaces, parks, sports and cultural facilities, exactly as listed in the report. So I'd just be grateful if in his summary the portfolio holder can explain to us how using SIL to fund the repair of a 60-year-old failed sluice gate actually supports development or mitigates the impact of development in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Judes-Butt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, it is. I support it because it's absolutely necessary and it needs to be supported. However, to be clear, and so the public fully understand, I've got a few questions, iterated to some extent by the previous speakers. But why was this left to the last minute when it's now deemed unsafe? And is it costing much more? We don't know. Now it's an emergency job, and we seem to be paying top dollar. It's a huge amount of money out of SIL funding, 1.2 million plus. In para 12, it touches on consultation. I was wondering exactly what consultation at this stage was intended, and whatever that is, I'd like to know. I'm sure the chamber would too. And last, it's a huge wad of cash. It's 1.2 million. And how is BCP deciding in future strategic allocation of SIL money across all big projects, rather than when they're ready to break? It isn't a criticism, it's a challenge put out there, hopefully so we can use it to move forward proactively. And I will be supporting it because it's necessary to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Anybody, any other member wish to contribute to the debate? No. So could I call upon the proposer to sum up at the end, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The fact that it was built in the 1960s, Councillor Hadley, I agree with you. The 1960s building, some of the builds there were not to the same standards as Victorians. I would like to hope that it will last for at least 60 years. That would be my intention. You also asked about open channel and a closed culvert. One of the issues was that because it was a closed culvert, we weren't allowed to send anyone in there. We had to have professional divers to go in there to do the repair work, and they weren't cost effective and they weren't checking the channel regularly, which is, again, one of the reasons why I would personally prefer to see an open channel. Yourself and Councillor Brown talked about why we were using SIL rather than the future funds. Well, I asked for the information about SIL to be put in the paper because I wanted to make sure I was happy with it, and I'm happy with what the definition that's put here. I can read it out to the Council, but I think everyone would be happy if I didn't. But I'm quite happy to say that I will support this. And why was it left to the last minute? Councillor Butt, I'm afraid it was left to the last minute because Poole Council said it fitted on their too hard to do job list. And when I became the portfolio holder, it was one of the first jobs I took on because I was concerned about what was happening with it. And I thought we needed to do it, and we needed to do it sooner rather than later. And quite frankly, I'd rather be here telling you and arguing why we're using certain funds for it, rather than explaining why the channel has collapsed. I hope those answers the questions, Chairman. Thank you, and I hope you all support it.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So if we could move to the vote to accept that recommendation, please. Those in favour? That looks like a majority. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Item 7B, Cabinet 25th of May 2022, minute number 8, Our Museum, Poole Museum Estate Redevelopment Programme. Councillor Dunlop, I understand that you will move the recommendations and then for Councillor Mellor to second the move. Councillor Dunlop.
You can work out the microphone. No cheers. I think everyone's familiar with the museum project and its importance. It's a 7.7 million redevelopment programme of Poole Museum to create a modern cultural centre and a community and cultural hub to enhance and enrich the experience of Poole Quay and the Old Town. As part of the quayside offering, it will be both a heritage attraction and a cultural hub in the Quay Quarter, supporting the rejuvenation of Lower High Street on the Quay. The museum's important historic buildings will be conserved and new spaces opened up to the public for the first time. New visitor facilities and better access will be integral to the plans, delivering capital improvements on all three historic buildings, Oakley's Mill, the Wool Hall and Scaplan's Court. The redevelopment programme and its funding streams are contained within the paper, which has already been approved by Council. But if I could draw your attention to paragraph 15, which details where the additional costs have occurred across the scheme. This has resulted in a 1.4 million funding gap, and I seek Council's approval to increase the capital budget according to the recommendations in the paper to facilitate this important project. This scheme is a significant investment in heritage and will transform Poole Museum into a major attraction and cultural and community hub and deliver on our big plan ambition to rejuvenate Poole. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Mellor, I understand you wish to second the...
Second, Chair, and I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Members would like to contribute to the debate, please. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. When this proposal was originally tabled, I was very, very supportive of it. I think we all were. The Council was unanimous in its approval of the scheme. But I'd just like to make the point here that it seems that the costs are escalating not through inflationary pressures, although part of it is. In the main, it's about scope increases. It's not very long ago that we approved over £6 million for this project, and within just a very short space of time, scope increases has increased the expenditure by £1.4 million. It's a huge additional sum. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be asked to open the checkbook again when further things come along? I just take, for example, the sill. It's funny, we've been talking about the sill allocation a moment ago. Here we see the sill contribution going up from £275,000 to another £500,000 of sill money. That's double the original contribution. And now we're also talking about prudential borrowing, and this is long-term borrowing, of another nearly £700,000. This is an enormous increase. My plea is, can we just, when we have a project, we scope it properly, we fund it properly, and then the people don't come back time and time again for additional funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Hadley, I understand you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I welcome this scheme overall. It's again in my ward, and I've been involved in some of the Heritage Action Zone fund work. I am concerned by the scope creep, as the previous speaker has mentioned, and the significant cost escalation thanks to Brexit and COVID. I'm also concerned that the SIL is being used to fill the gap, tripling the SIL contribution. I think it's really regrettable that given all the grant monies that the service has won for this scheme, and it is an excellent scheme, it's already a great visitor attraction to the area, the premier free attraction in the southwest, that they've chosen to charge for the excellent temporary exhibitions, reducing their accessibility to all of our residents. I don't expect it today, but I'd be really grateful if the portfolio could provide statistics on the weekly visitor numbers to the current Hardy exhibition, for which people have to pay, as against comparisons on previous free exhibitions. Where SIL monies have contributed to SANGS, the Council have not been able to charge for the associated car parking, and I can see in the financial table attached that the temporary space has been attributed to the loan element, but it's the overall scheme has attracted a lot of our money, a lot of English heritage money and other funding, and I think that we should be asking for donations, as we already do. We shouldn't be charging for access to something that has been largely funded out of grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Mellor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I would like to contribute briefly. I'd say, first of all, I completely agree. There is scope growth here. But why is that? It's because we are more committed to Poole and more committed to culture than any council I've sat on before. this is ambitious, but how are we funding it? We're funding it, you know, there's a lot of money in there through SIL. One of the reasons we're able to fund SIL, and we had it referenced in the previous paper, we have a £50 million futures fund now, you know, which is £50 million more infrastructure spending than we ever had before. So SIL and futures fund means we can go much further and much quicker and be more ambitious than we have done before. How are we paying for that? Through the LGR dividend, local government reorganisation dividend. You know, £50 million of futures fund costs us £1.3 million a year, and we're, you know, saving over £50 million a year. So this is money that we want to put in to Poole and across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And lastly, Chair, the prudential borrowing is linked to increases in services and the revenue, you know, the new cafe and the extended cafe as well there. So it's balanced and won't be a burden on the taxpayer. So, just stating again, we're absolutely up for culture. We're absolutely up for Poole. We've seen on both the last two papers millions of pounds of investment in Poole, and we're delighted to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. So, if there's nobody indicates, Councillor Anger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there is something here under general support for this, which people will well know. I've been supportive throughout all of this. I think there is a point here particularly about the financial stewardship around all of this, and I'll confine it to that because if it comes to full council, it may be, for instance, another 2 or 3 full councils later when we get an update on this project. And while I think I certainly, and I imagine a lot of people, the direction of it is undoubted and the worthiness of it is undoubted, I think probably it's testing the patience of me and many in the room where a surprise is coming through. And I suspect later on in this year, that'll be even more unwelcome later on in the year if there are any further financial surprises on this. So I think there's something here about an ongoing but a very constructive financial monitoring of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anger. No other contributions?
Councillor Butler.
Councillor Diana Butler, yes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to add my opinion about the financial implication, which is actually listed in the report, saying that costs may rise. This is quite worrying because usually if any of us apply for anything to be done to our houses, we usually expect the cost to stay more or less what we're quoted in the first place. Page 81 lists a few things. The capacity for the Scaplands Court to be doubled. To save costs, why can't we just keep it as it is now to 60 rather than 120? The temporary exhibition gallery, can't we use existing premises for that? On page 81, can I ask, has grade 1 listed building consent and approval from the Secretary of State been sought for this project? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Nobody else indicating? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the subject of running a tight ship, I have raised with the appropriate officer of the council about the fact that there was a test case down in Exeter where the business rateable value of Exeter Museum went from about £500,000 down to zero because they changed the process from the contractor's test method evaluation to profits method, and Exeter Museum, like a lot of museums, wasn't making much profit at all. I have raised it with the officer who's been holding back launching an appeal actually on all the museums across the BCP area because the Inland Revenue, the valuation officer, doesn't like that test case that went to court. But obviously, after the building work here is finished, the rateable value, which is currently £128,000, is going to jump up. And I think at that time that the valuation officer tries to put it up to, let's say, £200,000, that's the time that we should be particularly saying, no, you've got your maths wrong, do it on the profits method, and that could be reduced right down. And so the tax or the business rates that is paid on the museum can be saved, and obviously that will make the museum more profitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Anybody else wish to contribute to the debate? Councillor Dunlop, if I could ask you to sum up.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to answer a few points. I think that this is exactly what SIL should be used for. SIL is about an investment in things that benefit people. So I think having part of this coming from SIL is right and proper. Another chunk of it is coming from funds that are raised. This leaves us with a borrowing, as Councillor Barclays said, of nearly 700,000. But if you look at the repayments on that, it is covered by the anticipated profits that will come in from the increased visitor numbers. I think that anyone who would, I think it'd be quite naive for anyone sitting in this chamber tonight to think that costs wouldn't have increased when you reassess things from early 2001 to October to now. We all know construction costs are increasing, labour costs are increasing. Some of the increased costs here is actually where we've taken a decision to expand the scope of what's being done while we're doing the work, because the overall objective, the overall delivery is a benefit. It's going to increase the benefits. I sincerely hope I won't be coming back, Councillor Enger, and asking for more money. I believe we have a robust governance arrangement in place. It's not great that costs go up, but I think that where we are at the moment, often things are a bit of a moving feast. I don't agree with you, Councillor Butler. I think Scaplan's Court is an important building, and it's important that we maximise what we're doing there because it will help with the returns. I think that's probably just about it. So I hope you will support the recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. So we can progress to the vote, please. Could I ask for those in favour to accept the recommendation? Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Item 7C, Cabinet, 22nd of June 2022, minute number 15, outturn report. Councillor Mellor, I understand that you will move the recommendations, and then for Councillor Broadhead to second the move.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very happy to move the recommendations. This is our outturn report, so obviously we get it once a year. This report, as you will all see, is a hugely positive outturn, and I would like to thank our finance team, corporate management board, and my cabinet colleagues who have delivered this excellent result in some of the most challenging times. This is the outturn of the first full budget of this administration. When only 5 months before our budget was set, the MTFP was showing the £50 million hole we inherited from our colleagues opposite. This surplus was delivered while also freezing council tax. And let's just reflect on that briefly. How good does that decision look now, with the cost of living crisis? And, the real pressure our residents face. And we've now delivered for 2 years in a row a council tax freeze. Also delivered a record investment in children and adults, service for our most vulnerable. We've delivered our COVID catch-up fund of 1 million, which was so well received by people that needed support more than ever. It was our time to act. We've invested in cleaner and safer streets, doubling the climate budget and starting to reinvest in community services in a way that is now starting to show BCP as a leader nationally in delivering strengths-based approaches and asset-based community development alongside our communities. For some detail, which everybody will see in the paper, the positive outturn was 6.8 million, which has been split invested in the 22-23 budget, and in addition 3.5 million is transferred to the financial resilience reserves. So let's summarise. Low tax, high investment in services, and increasing unearmarked reserves. It hasn't gone unnoticed on this side of the chamber, but during the last year, the opposition finance lead tried to take a recommendation through overview and scrutiny to stop all spending immediately because he saw no way we would balance the budget. I believe it was also stated that if we did balance the budget, he would be the first to congratulate us and buy me a drink. So, well, I'd be delighted to join you if the offer is still there. So, we're not just balanced, we're better, by many millions of pounds. Balanced or better, that's what Conservative administrations and previous finance leads across Bournemouth and Poole that I'm aware of always and consistently delivered balanced or better budgets, and I thank them for that, and I'm glad that we've been able to follow in their footsteps. So, I'm very happy to propose this paper, Chair, and the recommendations as per the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. Councillor Broadhead, I understand you wish to second.
Yeah, delighted to second. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, would you like to? Councillor Cox, please.
Respond to that. can't help but respond to that. I do congratulate the leader of the council for getting the budget balanced and that we have a positive outturn. I have to say I hold more credence with the finance director having stuff up his sleeve that has allowed that to happen. Like any good finance director, they usually have quite a lot up their sleeve. So I do congratulate you for that, and I'm happy to buy anybody a drink at any time if you want. But I will take issue with the fact that he says he inherited a £50 million deficit on the medium-term budget, which he clearly, which was always in deficit. And if you care to look at the medium-term financial plan at the moment, it's £90 million. So all they've managed to do is increase the deficit and actually increase the risk that this council is under in their financial management. So we shall see what happens in the future. But I took the time out to listen to the Cabinet the other day and to see what was being said. And I'll come on to that later on in terms of the medium-term financial plan and the risks that are involved in setting the budget that you did do for the current financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Anybody else wish to? Oh, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I'm only going to make one comment on this, and of course it's always good to be able to present the outturn in this way. We do need to correct the fact that when there was a change of administration, the government had not yet clarified that they were going to repay all of the deficits caused by COVID. And with conversations that I had with the Finance Director shortly after the change of administration, it was made very clear that the timing was fortuitous. So to continue to repeat the timing of your takeover is just really getting quite boring. The only other thing I would say is we are over 3 years into this council, and I was in the presence of staff members today who are horrified that they are sitting side by side with colleagues who are on completely different contracts because political decisions have been taken by this administration rather than dealing with the pay and reward problem that we promised our staff when we became one council that we would resolve. So yes, congratulations for this wonderful outturn, but try telling that to the members of staff who are still sitting there unfairly being paid considerably different from the colleagues in the next desk. That's not right, and that needs to be resolved.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Brown, I think you indicated.
Yeah, just briefly, just to complete the historic record, the leader made a mention about the BCP Council delivering a balanced budget and positive outturn, balanced or better budget, I think. And he said previous Conservative administrations on Bournemouth and Poole councils, as they had done, just for the record and the completion of the historic record, that the Unity Alliance also delivered a balanced budget and a positive surplus. So the Unity Alliance at the start of BCP Council also followed the practice of a balanced or better budget.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any Councillor Rampton?
Apologies, Chair. I just wanted to say I completely missed what Councillor Brown was saying. Not suggesting that he repeats it, but I don't know if he had his microphone on, but the audio is very poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members to indicate, please? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it follows on from the point that Councillor Slade made really. There are some warning signs within this outturn report. One of them is around the transformation savings. We've only achieved half of the budgeted savings for this year, and there's a further 10 million to find next year. The lead made reference in the last item to LGR dividend funding the Futures Fund. Well, the LGR dividend hasn't yet happened because we haven't made the savings through transformation as were promised and as we were trying to do, which is part of why our staff feel rather let down. On the capital budget, the strong outlier there is the TCF, Transforming Cities Fund, where we've only spent 15 million of the anticipated 41 million. Now, again, I appreciate that there have been difficulties in the supply chain and those sorts of things, but actually one third of the overall sum spent seems to be in the Dorset Council area, and we've delivered three bus shelters, three crossings and 6.4 kilometres of cycleway, which doesn't seem an awful lot for the promise of what we were trying to achieve there. And I have a question really around the Sturt Court, and it kind of comes back to what Councillor Bartlett was raising earlier. Sturt Court recladding 3.4 million grant, more required detail to follow. And it comes back to ensuring that, that we are managing these overspends and running that. But I'm also concerned because that contractor is the contractor that we have for Admiral Court. And the question really is, does that also affect the Admiral Court works, the 4 tower blocks in Poole Town as well? So that's another little thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Anger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one particular point on paragraph 96 and the environments. I think credit to the portfolio holders. I think some good specifics on Scaplan's Court, the Russell Coates, the essential maintenance there, UCP, Upton Country Park on the volunteer facility, active travel street furniture near the schools, and there's some bits on the roadside as well. Less welcome is the 300k on a cliff management strategy, I've got to say. There's a bit of sort of, I've got to take one here. It took long enough to develop the seafront strategy, despite my best attempts. The last thing, maybe in an easier position to challenge now, is a whole load of time navel gazing on a cliff management strategy, when probably the order of the day is to actually do some front-facing work that residents will actually see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anger. Any more before I... Councillor Pettivin.
Thank you. It's not quite as rosy reading this report as we're being led to believe. I'm particularly looking at the adult social care section. There are repeated reference in point 15, 21, 22 to outstanding vacancies and savings being made because of the outstanding vacancies. Well, frankly, I would rather see a much smaller surplus or no surplus at all in the adult social care budget and have these vacancies filled and the care being given to the people who so clearly need it.
Thank you, Councillor Pettivin. Any further contributions, please? No? So could I call on the proposer to sum up, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to, Chair. Thank you very much. I'll just start by saying thank you very much for the compliment. We appreciate that. In terms of just the last point, it's fresh in my mind, if I can, Councillor Provident. So we've actually put pretty much £25 million into adult social care over the last 2 years. It's more money before ever's gone into adult social care. There are, as a number of authorities and businesses are finding at the moment difficulties recruiting. We would urge anybody to. We have a number of vacancies on our website, and we'd be delighted if people would like to see and spread that word. I will just, if I can just indulge, Chair, a little bit of fact correction, effectively. Councillor Cox talked about the £50 million MTFP gap and made the assumption, or it was certainly presented like that was over the 5-year period, because he was concerning it to our current MTFP. But it wasn't actually a £50 million gap over the 5 years. It was a £50 million gap in about 5 months, because we inherited it in October and we had to deliver it in February. In that, and that's, importantly to point out, and again I thank the former leader of council's compliment to the government for coming over the hill and funding local authorities like they absolutely did. But what we also did, that was a part of our strategy. Actually, materially more of that was actually our revised financial strategy to fix that gap. And then we'll also, while we're talking about the previous leader of the council, your point in terms of coming over the hill for the staff, and let's do that. Well, let's actually take a step back to think of the budget we inherited. Had a £15 million a cut in staff cost because that was the only solution you had to fund your budget. And that was going to be £15 million of transformation, people taken out of your organisation before we'd done any of the transformation savings. What did we do? First of all, we halved it. We said that's not the way to do it. Then we delivered our budget and we managed to get away with only having to do over £2 million last year. So we're the people who weren't asking staff teams to be decimated before we've actually gone through the transformation benefit. So, and I'll just leave off in terms of, the MTFP. We talked about a 5-year MTFP. Actually, where we are, there is a surplus for next year, as you'd expect at this time. It's not surplus, a gap for next year. But over the course of a 5-year MTFP, it largely balances because of the extra investment we're making in transformation. So, again, fundamentally, and we're talking about facts, 6.8 million surplus. There was a balanced budget under Unity Alliance. It wasn't to the extent that we've managed to deliver in the time, also that we managed to deliver it in. So, Chair, I appreciate your indulgence and I'm very happy to move for our recommendations as put.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. So if we could progress to the vote, please. For those in favour of accepting the recommendation, please indicate with your hands clearly in the air. I think, okay, thank you. Those against? And abstentions? Thank you. It's carried. Item 7D, Cabinet 22nd of June 2022, minute number 16, medium-term financial plan, MTFP update. Councillor Miller, I understand that you will move the recommendations, and then for Councillor Broadhead, second to move. Councillor
Yeah, absolutely, Chair, and apologies for any repetition here. These papers are obviously quite linked. So again, a very positive report to bring forward that updates our 5-year MTFP and recognises, and I quote, the improvement in some of the key risk areas as identified in the setting of the 22-23 budget. Additionally, and I look forward to a time I'm not stood here reflecting on the most challenging of times, but additionally, post the war in Ukraine, the global recovery from the pandemic and the resulting cost of living crisis, this MTFP update provides an immediate solution to the impact of inflation, which we have made assumptions to be £14 million in our current year, not aware of when we set the budget in February, and £18 million pressure for 23-24. We have just returned from the LGA conference in Harrogate, and I'm very proud to say we're one of the only councils that has been able to so positively and immediately cover the cost of living expenditure. That is a credit to the previous paper in terms of the exceptional financial outturn, and also the work has been undertaken in terms of mitigations while still focusing steadfastly on our priorities of massive investment in the most vulnerable, cleaner and safer streets and the climate emergency. And we should all reiterate our thanks to our finance colleagues, CMB, alongside our portfolio holders who have delivered this. We also talk about, in this paper, we talk about the budget process for 23-24, which I look forward to engagement from members of all sides of this chamber. A part of that will be the decisions we take around second homes and the extra flexibility government is intending to grant us there through the Levelling Up White Paper. I think universally across local government, we appreciate being given extra flexibility on how to construct the right budgets for our areas. And if ultimately delivered by government, this will be an interesting flexibility for us to consider in an area with such high second home population. Technically, we do need to adopt the use of this flexibility now so that we're able to have sufficient notice should we ultimately decide to enact it in whatever form works for our area. And I look forward to hearing the views of members on this as part of our budget setting process. Chair, again, I'm proud of what we're delivering in amazing times, and I formally move the recommendations as put in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Broadhead, I understand you wish to second.
Happy to second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, contributions to the debate, please. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Relating to the budget setting process, I welcome the transparency and the openness. One question I would have is Budget Cafe 1 in November suggests there is a second Budget Cafe, but I cannot see that happening. Is it possible for a Budget Cafe to happen in maybe September, October, and then a Budget Cafe 2 to check the progress maybe in January? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Councillor Cox, I think you indicated.
Thank you. I see the optimism is still there, despite everything that's happened, particularly with the National Conservative Party. But I have to say, I am not optimistic at all about the medium-term financial plan. Maybe that's just because I'm a boring old Conservative with small C accountant, but so be it. But I do have to say, in terms of the speed of the mitigation that had to be undertaken, there's a very good reason for that. They had to act quickly, otherwise there would have been a Section 114 notice, because this budget that we have at the moment is so risky. And I did already point out that I did listen very carefully to the cabinet discussions. It really wasn't a cabinet discussion, was it? It was just the two of them having a chat with each other. But actually, the name Kemi Badenoch came up, and it's a very interesting lady who's obviously quite busy at the moment. But she's, she actually recently said, and I'll read this out if you don't mind, that in terms of the flexible use of receipts, capital receipts, that a new condition was introduced which requires local governments or local authorities to send specified details of their planned use of the flexibility in advance of their use. Now, the leader proudly proclaims that she's taking particular interest in that. Well, she is probably taking particular interest in that because she's worried. And in response to a written question in the House of Commons from the Conservative MP for Christchurch, the Right Honourable Sir Christopher Chope, she actually wrote, the government is now carefully considering whether amendments are needed. I'll just read it out. Amendments are needed to the direction and the guidance to make sure the freedoms are used in the spirit and intent in which they were provided. Clearly, the spirit and intent in which they're provided is not what this administration is doing. This administration is taking severe risks with the council taxpayers' money. And that is the problem with the current budgets. Now, you all may...
3 minutes, Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other Councillor Judes, but I think indicated, then Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to try and jiggle my machine, make it go up because it's on the machine. I can't really see. Right. Okay. Thank you. With regard to the Levelling Up agenda, we're advised in the report the impact of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, that the part of the bill announced by the government in May 22 in the Queen's speech stated that the government set out 2 significant changes in respect of council tax. And I'm going to state these because I rely on it later. And one is to reinforce the incentive for owners to bring empty properties back to reuse and to reduce the qualifying period for the empty homes premium from 2 years to 1, therefore doubling that council tax charge for them. And 2, to support councils in addressing the impact of second homes to provide authorities the power to levy a council tax premium of up to 200% again. So the same for empty homes, second home owners. So the definition of a second home is the dwelling occupied periodically, and there is no resident, I think it means no permanent resident of the dwelling, it's not there in the report, and the dwelling is substantially furnished. We're advised that the ambition of this council is to bring empty homes back into use. Therefore, will raising substantial revenue from second home owners elicit the reaction required from them, as surely most will be able to afford to pay the uplift. While the measures proposed may bring a short-term increase of income from the empty second homes already known to the council, could a threat of a council tax premium create a powerful incentive for owners to avoid keeping the council informed of a property's current status? It could also inevitably penalise some owners due to circumstances out of their control. Therefore, what council tax band is it thought best to apply this uplift to, or is it thought to be equitable to be across A to H? If it does elicit the reaction required, will this not in time be a dwindling revenue stream that cannot be relied on? So how confident is this council that this levy will enforce, for example, developers to stop land banking and second homeowners to sell up and bring the empty homes back onto the available housing market? And finally, and now that government has somewhat imploded and the levelling up timetable is looking rather devastated, how certain is this council that this will happen, and how do we fill the funding gap if it doesn't? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Hadley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested in priority G, which is about, as a one-off, investing 1.5 million to improve the council customer services prior to the transformation, partly because it's clearly not happened yet. I had two residents yesterday contacting me practically in tears because they couldn't get any response from the telephone lines into the council, and I'm sure that other members have similar experience with people who just can't access our services. We'll come back to item 13, talks about moving future places from being funded to a fee basis in a later paper, but I find that really unfortunate around hiding the huge salaries and not really about transparency and ensuring good value for our taxpayers. Under 17B, I was surprised that on one pathology, we proffered a loan to the NHS to create a new combined pathology service on the Royal Bournemouth site, or the back of the Royal Bournemouth site. And yet, although the NHS found the money themselves, it seems we may be facing up to a £500,000 revenue cost for something that didn't happen. I'd love to know why how that arose. But the biggie really is around the intention to increase our indebtedness hugely, from not only satisfied with already doubling the indebtedness threshold of the council in his short time in office, the leader now wants to double it again to become top of the third quarter of indebtedness. What an ambition. So to raise it to £1.33 billion, which is just mortgaging our children's future, and I think really unfortunate. On page 147, it talks about levelling up, and I note that we are ranked 47th in terms of the awards from the Levelling Up Fund. It's very interesting that Cornwall, as a tourist area, was second on the list, the highest unitary authority. But for some reason, our influence doesn't seem to extend in the way that we're so often told it does. The other really big thing is the financial implications. The warning from the Chief Financial Officer on page 148 that the Council has already ignored his warnings, and the risk assessments, which do come back to the risk of a Section 114 notice in terms of the schools grant, but also the structural deficit and the transformation savings being well below and behind the anticipations. So I think there are some significant challenges that we all face in terms of making the MTFP work, and I wish we can be honest with our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Broadhead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that have been raised this evening, particularly by Councillor Judes-Butt around the approvals that we have to make tonight with regard to the changes that the government has put forward in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. As the leader has said earlier on, what we have to do tonight in order to give us the option in the future of having that debate is approve the principle that we could look at this. We will have, and I'm really looking forward to, time as we move forward to the budget to have a really full debate about whether some of the issues that Councillor Judes-Butt and many others have raised, it makes it the right thing to be doing, whether we take up the offer to increase the council tax for second homes. There are clearly pros and cons, and I think we need to debate that at great length. However, in order to have that debate later, what we have to do now is enact it so that we've got the specific time to be able to have that 12-month period that we have to have by law. I think it's also worth saying Councillor Butt raised a number of questions around how the whole process might be enacted. It is still something that is going through the House of Commons and the House of Lords at the moment. I think it's on a second or third reading, and there may well be changes within that as to how it might be administered, and the organisational things such as how do you actually quantify a second home. I think all of that detail will come, and at that point we'll be able to, as a full council, have that debate and decision about whether it is something we wish to put into our full council with all of the facts at that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Phipps, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd just like to follow up on some of the risks that are going along with this medium-term financial plan. We're using 66.2 million of reserves to support budgets just to the end of 22-23. We're showing a funding gap for 23-24 with no plan for dealing with it. It just says there could be receipts from new commercial models. So what are they? It also says in the report we can't continue to ignore the dedicated schools grant deficit after the end of March 2023. So what is the plan for that? And the very important assumption that money will be received from the sale of the beach huts. This has already been mentioned before, but I'll just bring you to page 137, But paragraph 10 actually states, a risk remains that in drafting this legislation, DLUHC intended to encourage local authorities to dispose of surplus assets, not to be inventive in the regeneration of capital receipts. And they are in the process of reflecting on the Council's proposals to generate capital receipts from the disposal of beach huts. So, am I right? It's no way certain yet. The government's actually going to approve this very risky scheme. And I think we were awaiting a report about this, weren't we, to underpin it? I don't think we've seen that yet. I also noticed that some of this money, 12.9 million, it seems, is going to redundancies. Now, that's a lot of money to lose staff when we're already having trouble even answering the telephones in good time for our residents. Then there's the refinancing of future places, and I know we're coming on to that as we go into the agenda. But it's another risk. And the business plan, how are we going to get this money back? Where's the plan? How's it going to happen? I'd be interesting to know that. Finally, at paragraph 21, we are asking approval of the strategy as at paragraph 21. And this includes increasing the debt threshold to the eye-watering 1.334 billion. It was already increased to 855 million against the wishes of many of us. And the more you increase the threshold, the more this administration will spend, and the more future debt this council has for future generations. I think we should have a sustainable budget, which is, and this is words from here, mindful of the long-term consequences of short-term decisions. And this isn't right. We're not doing that here. This council isn't living within its means, and I just think we're procuring debt for generations to come, and there are too many risks here.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. That's 3 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I echo the comments of Councillor Phipps regarding the limit on borrowing. I think we'll be talking about that a bit more when we talk about Future Places Limited. But I'd just like to make a comment, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead, for the clarification about the discussion about the second homes premium and the empty properties premium. But there's one thing worse than paying 100% premium on an empty property, and that's having to pay 200% on an empty property, particularly when you're paying 200% for getting no services whatsoever. So I think it's a fundamental point about that. I understand the principle about trying to get empty properties back into use, but there are a vast array of reasons why properties are empty. It's not always by choice, and it does penalise people in certain circumstances. I also think that the second home premium could be very counterproductive for Bournemouth, and I think we just need to be a little bit cautious about that one, but I know that we're going to be having a debate about it, and therefore I will support that because we need to put that in place to have the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments, which some colleagues have picked up already, really. I was surprised when I saw paragraph 1G, which talked about the £1.5 million allocated this year to be invested in customer services. And like colleagues, that's certainly not the feedback I've been getting from residents who, many of whom have just given up doing stuff online because the systems don't work properly or don't give you the right information. And then they try on the phone and they hang on for ages. And I've had a resident recently who's tried twice doing something, starts talking to the customer service representative and just gets cut off midstream. So has to recall, queue again, gets through, gets cut off again, and has given up and just contacted me and said, can you try and do something about it? Because you can't do it online, you can't get through to customer services, the lines aren't working. And I've heard it before in audit and governance where they say, well, yeah, we know the systems aren't working properly, but we've got a programme over the next year to sort of try and sort it out. And over the next year is no good. The systems aren't working. Just get and fix it. There's information that's wrong on the screen. There's things that don't work on the online reporting. Just get the system fixed. Don't have a programme over the next year. It's broken already. This £1.5 million doesn't seem to be having any impact if it started spending already. Paragraph 2C about the dedicated schools grant deficit, and like one of my colleagues as well, it talks about the 31st of March 2023 being the deadline. What will happen then when this statutory instrument expires? And that dedicated schools grant has to be balanced against reserves, which we don't have enough to balance against that. You know, what's going to happen? Are the government going to shift that back, or, you know, otherwise we're going to be in a really difficult situation. The debt threshold increase, the figures are just eye-watering. And the only comment really I've got is that just remember in the future when we set revenue budgets to deliver services for the residents of BCP, the debt repayments have first call on the money that we raise. So regardless of what services we're going to deliver, we have to make certain debt repayments. And if the debt's going up, the repayments are going up before we can even deliver any services for the residents. So you're taking a massive chunk out of the council tax and out of revenue budget just to service debt in the coming years. So I think there's a strong warning there about the level of debt that's proposed. And then I think Councillor Butt referenced earlier about we got recommendation 6 before us about the changes to empty homes premium and second homes. I am a bit concerned. It talks positively about the empty homes premium to encourage people to bring empty homes back into use and reducing that from 2 years to 1 year. 1 year is quite tight if you're dealing with delays in getting probate or legal delays when a relative has died and the property's empty because of that, and there's arguments and legal issues over that. Or indeed I've had in my ward where there was a fire in a house, unfortunately the lady's husband died, the insurers and the repair took a long time, and then we're talking about whacking on double council tax to somebody who's bereaved and desperately trying to repair a damaged property. I think we need to be careful about reducing that from 2 to 1 years.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Iyengar, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's sort of on a more reflective point. I'm just nervous that what we're having tonight is not the real discussion that needs to be had on this topic, because we've got some very important items of content in here, like the flexible use of capital receipts and what comes from central government on that, which is seismic, whichever way it goes on that one. We'll come to the point about future places and the business model for that. And then also the levelling up and regen bill, now that, of course, the key sponsor of that bill is no longer in office. And therefore, will it continue? Okay, we can assume it may do. But then there's a question there about the cost benefit of that scheme. And what I mean by that is by imposing what is a draconian sort of 100% surcharge on whether it be second homes or empty homes, then that comes with a significant enforcement effort around all of that as well. And maybe quite rightly, the conditions around that enforcement are pretty strict. So sometimes that makes me wonder about, sometimes is the enforcement worth it, the bang for the buck? Now, these three things, the flexibility for capital receipts, the future places, and then the levelling up and regen bill, we're not talking in a sense about those tonight. What we're talking about is the process, which is it'll all come back later to us at some point. I do have a sense of foreboding, and I'm trying to be constructive about all of this because we've got to get through this, is that we're storing up something pretty huge come the autumn on this when we've got less time to manoeuvre with all of this. So maybe it's a vague point I'm making, but we can approve this tonight, but all we're doing is deferring it in effect, and there's going to be a bigger and more fractious discussion coming shortly. So in a sense, I don't like the way this paper was presented, but maybe reluctantly I'll go along with it. But I think these issues have got to be revisited, maybe when we know more, and it's going to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Slade, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw sort of attention to the level of risk. The Section 151 officer made some very public statements a few weeks ago regarding the warnings that were made in the February budget and how councillors collectively took a decision to support a budget that didn't take that advice necessarily on board. For clarification, many of us did not support that budget, and looking at the levels of risk in here, which clearly state that our reserves are under the threshold that is suggested by SITFA, that the social care reforms may not actually be affordable, that it suggests that no more borrowing is undertaken unless it has a self-funding business case. The risks that are being presented by the Section 151 officer now, on the 12th of July, feel stronger and more urgent than those that were presented to us in February. And I think it would be a huge mistake to walk away with a self-congratulatory, didn't we do well with £6 million in the bank, and isn't this a great MTFP, without taking on board the fact that it was strongly, this is all built on sand. The sand on which our beach huts are built is the only thing supporting this budget. And we don't know yet whether that is going to be a successful project or not. So I appeal once again to the Leader of the Council. Please go away and prepare a plan B. Your time is running out. The meeting about the beach huts is a week tomorrow. We have no idea whether that KPMG report even exists. There is a suggestion that perhaps tomorrow it will appear out of the ether. But that is 1 week before this is due to be scrutinised in a special meeting, and the risks here are getting higher and higher and higher, and I absolutely cannot sit by silently and just listen to the self-congratulations on the other side.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Any other members wish to contribute to the debate? So, could I ask the proposer to sum up, please, Councillor Miller?
Yeah, absolutely happy to, Chair. And we did have a long and detailed debate on this overview and scrutiny as well, which was helpful. A lot of these points have been raised and answered there. Before I go into some detail, perhaps I just find this absolutely fascinating, and I'd just like to reflect on it, a little bit really, in terms of what actually is happening politically in this chamber. So what are we talking about? We're talking about housing. How do we find a solution to our housing crisis? How do we get more homes built so we can have local homes for local people? When we talk about the debt, and Councillor Slade pointed it out there, we are saying quite clearly in this paper, no debt that isn't linked to a business case. So then, effectively, and the only things we're allowed to borrow for are housing and regeneration, effectively. So if we did choose, to use our full borrowing cap, which at the moment we're in the bottom third, we'd be coming up to the middle, and nothing is committed in this council that takes us any further than the mid-tier point. And so full council would have to decide on anything, and it can only be for housing or regeneration. So you've got one side of the chamber sticking up for building local homes for local people, and another side of the chamber criticising it, saying we shouldn't even give ourselves the option of doing that. And I feel that's important. Steve Bartlett, I've got the hugest amount of respect for you. I know how passionate you are about building homes. The discussions we've had on it. But you can't build homes if you're not going to pay for them. Then, and then who's here standing up for the second homeowner? Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? It's our Liberal Democrat colleagues. What we're saying is let's have a discussion about it. Let's take what government are planning to give us and have a discussion as a full council about what's the right way to deliver. What we're also saying, you didn't like the budget, didn't support the budget. No, you didn't, because it had 15 million, more million pounds going into adult services. Again, record for this is 13 million pounds going into children's services. We are putting more money into service delivery than you were even dreamed of, and we're doing that, and we're delivering balanced and better budgets. We talk about the beach huts. A couple of things on that, and you quite rightly said there is a detailed overview and scrutiny session planned. Great. That's actually an extra overview and scrutiny session than we were debating, but we thought we need to have more scrutiny. Again, absolutely. Let's have that discussion. There's a simple point here, and again, this is actually for Councillor Brown, and I think a few people have made it, but effectively, I appreciate we don't share the same financial background, but what happens in accounting is debits and credits. So you credit the borrowing, and then the other side of that is you have an asset. So that asset delivers a surplus. So we are only doing that for buildings and homes, effectively, and each one of those will deliver a surplus. So you're saying it's going to affect the revenue budget, couldn't be more wrong. It actually is delivering money into the revenue budget because you don't understand accounting.
3 minutes, Councillor Miller.
Okay, for you, well, okay. I will sit down if you would like me to, Chair.
Please. Okay. Thank you. Progress to the vote, please, to seek approval for this recommendation. Those in favour? And those against? I think we'll go to count, please, if we may. So those in favour again. So all those in favour again, please indicate nice and high. Thank you. Democratic Services will count. Those against, please.
How many was that?
And any abstentions, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 6. So that's carried 37 to 21 with 6 abstentions. Thank you. Thank you. Item 7E, Cabinet 22nd of June 2022, minute number 17, BCP Future Places Limited, revised business plan and funding mechanism. Councillor Broadhead, I understand that you will move the recommendations, then for Councillor Mellor to second the move. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you for the really detailed overview and scrutiny session we had on this as well. Chairman, I'll try and, well, I have to stay within the allotted time. Really proud of all that we've achieved with our regeneration ambitions only over the last couple of years. Colleagues will remember it was only last year where we recognised the fact that outside of the redevelopment companies that we already had, such as Bournemouth Development Company, we had £3 billion of regeneration opportunities across the whole BCP region, most of it actually focused on pool, and we needed to do something about that. And we looked through all of the different options that were presented to us, and towards the end of last year we created Future Places, which is a wholly owned council company, and reasons that we actually create a council company are many. We have many council companies already, but actually this paper is one of the reasons that we actually decided to go down that route, as we'll talk about in a moment. At that time we worked on the assumption that, like many of our other functions within the council, we would continue to provide an ongoing revenue support to Future Places to take forward that £3 billion of regeneration opportunities, because that seemed like the best practice at the time. However, quite quickly, looking at others around the country and what they've achieved, we found that there was a better way to fund, which actually can really help us to keep on delivering our regeneration ambitions in the future. Be First is one of the examples that we use, and in this year's budget, back in February, we announced that we would be changing the funding mechanism of Future Places, so that actually that they would then be working at risk, and when they were at the position to bring forward the strategic outline business cases, they would bring that forward to the council, and at that point we would pay them for their services rather than just giving them money up front. A couple of reasons that we did that. The main one is that it really gives us an opportunity to keep that regeneration ambition going forward. If we simply continue to provide revenue support to Future Places or any of our functions, it's really, really hard to get that back. So particularly when we're talking about things like regeneration, quite often what happens is that any profits that are generated that come back as a capital receipt. We can only use, in normal times, capital to purchase other capital. So really, we have to write off the revenue support. Actually, having this ability where Future Places are working at risk, bringing the options forward at a later time, means that when that gets to outline strategic business case, we can capitalise that money, which then means that we can continue to fund this forward in the future. So that's a reason for this change that we're approving tonight. That's one of the primary reasons. We're also in this recommendation approving the business case, which updates the business case to make reference to this change of funding mechanism as well. Chairman, I'm pretty much run out of time, and I'm sure there'll be lots of debate. What I would say is that we've had some really intensive meetings with Homes England recently. I'm really looking forward to some announcements soon about a big arrangement we'll be having with Homes England, and recently they announced that if you wanted an example of a council that is doing regeneration properly, look at BCP.
Thank
so
you.
clearly achieving. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Mellor, please.
Second Chair, I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. Members like to contribute to the debate. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. I've supported the creation of Future Places Limited thus far, and I was very impressed by the quality of the initial business plan. However, issues have arisen since then that have given me some cause for concern. I'd like to list some of them. This is about cost of the BCP Council. The company, Future Places, is clearly set up being an independent company, located by itself in its own team, etc., etc., which is not quite what I thought it would be. I thought it would be almost part of the council. We were sort of ensured that it would have the same sort of levels of scrutiny in its treatment as a technical company. But What I'm saying is it is a consultancy company, it generates consultancy rates of pay, but it's not just consultancy charges, because there are other costs which I don't think I was that aware of before. One is that council will end up paying for corporate overheads of the company. It's HR, it's finance, it's marketing, and it's the executive team. It will have its own accommodation, which will be part of the charges. Corporation tax will be paid on profits. VAT on charges coming from the company. There will be costs to BCP for the commissioning of services and other BCP corporate costs. Changing to the funding arrangements results in cost of borrowing. This borrowing does not acquire an asset on behalf of residents. Money is spent on the services bought from the company, which would normally be considered as revenue expenditure. Now, just moving on to the proposed charging mechanism, the cost of charging model giving a 33% profit margin is a license to print money. There is no incentive to complete a project. The more cost and the longer it goes on produces more profit, but then more profit, then more corporation tax. There's also no risk on future places as projects are not realised for whatever reason. Any company losses are covered by the owner of future places. That is to say, BCP Council as funded by the taxpayer. Also, although the company is owned by the council, this does not necessarily mean the profits will be returned to the council as profits, because profits can be used to fund employee bonuses. Just move on, availability of council borrowing and third-party finance. Now, future places projects are dependent on raising council borrowing up to about 2.3 billion, but this pales into insignificance compared to what would be required from third-party finance. If council borrowing and third-party finance does not become available, then the taxpayer-funded investment into future places will be wasted. Also, I'm uncertain if the council or our residents have the appetite for such massive levels of borrowing, especially as we've not yet completed the transformation programme. The last point is about scrutiny. Previously, I've been persuaded that as a tackle company, there would be complete transparency of decisions, since I was reasonably happy about the proposed governance arrangements. However, my view has now changed. This is primarily because the changes introduced to the Council's O&S system no longer provide sufficient capacity and maybe the inclination to ensure the adequate scrutiny of the company's operations.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hadley, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I started with concerns about Future Places being yet another arm's length development company, given the history, particularly in Bournemouth, of that. But I gave it an open mind, particularly given the strong steer towards placemaking rather than just development, and the concept of the team acting as our internal experts to ensure the council gets quality, value for money outcomes. The reason we have internal teams for urban design and placemaking is because they're clearly accountable to us, as the previous speakers have highlighted. And whilst regenerating pool is one of the 5 key themes, I've only had one meeting as the ward councillor with the key Future Places individuals. We've just covered in the outturn report in the MTFP, there are some dire warnings from the Chief Financial Officer in there about expenditure. And so it seems that a 5 times explosion in the working capital is reckless at this time, especially when I read in the MTFP on page 147 that no further capital expenditure will be made without business cases. The business plan also suggests they're currently 32% underspent, so they're clearly not spending the money we've already given them. In terms of charging, this idea of charging third, so a third for the staffing costs, a third for other costs, and a third profit. This is the council paying profit to an external organisation, and then there's the acquisition and disposal fees on top of that, and then the management fees on top of that. All of this is benchmarked at commercial market rates. No discount for us as the owners of it. The only difference is that Future Places will have exclusive rights to skim and scam exorbitant fees and charges onto council taxpayers and future residents without having the costs of having to bid for the work. You'll say, I'm sure, that this is wholly owned and therefore the funds will come back to us, or we'll only get what the salaries, office and other costs leave behind. And paragraph 44 shows that they will get their fees and we will bear the cost for anything that falls after the business case approval, whether it falls at planning, construction or occupation. We won't get the clear, impartial advice on what's in the best interest of the public, but instead a focus on what maximises the fees. It's very bad for the visionary stewardship redevelopment of our area that we were initially promised, and very poor value for the taxpayer, for whom we should all be serving. Other staff time is capitalised without creating such a financial scheme, and I think that we should be, if we need to make it capital rather than revenue, and I was really concerned on the previous one, I forgot to mention, around highways maintenance being revenue. You should be ashamed of this, and so should anyone who supports this scam. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Did any other member indicate? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments. I sort of had an open mind like other colleagues, but I am becoming more sceptical about this setup of BCP Future Places, and it was talked about initially about council setting up separate companies for various reasons. We've had experience some years ago when the council set up Tricuro with Dorset Council to deliver adult social care services. Call me a cynic, but I felt that was very much to avoid having to have staff under the full sort of local government terms and conditions and all the benefits that go with that. And we saw very soon with Poole Council that staff lost some of the benefits they previously had under the council when they moved to Tricuro, despite being assured that they wouldn't. And so it seemed in that case, in terms of delivering adult social care, a separate company was set up to avoid providing all the benefits to staff. On the other hand, looking at this BCP Future Places, I believe that setting up a separate company to avoid local government restrictions around benefits to staff so that they can exceed them and actually pay consultation fees to organisations that we would never contemplate as a local authority, and to pay salaries to people, looking at the figures here in the confidential appendix, that we wouldn't consider within the local authority. So my belief is it's setting up a company so that it can avoid the scrutiny and avoid the limitations placed in terms of employing local authority staff. I'm concerned, like a colleague mentioned, about paragraph 44, where it talks about the risk moving to the council once Future Places have been paid for their advice. And if profits do come from this venture, as is budgeted for, corporation tax will be payable on those budgets when it never would be if we did it ourselves within the council. And Tricuro have come unstuck with that, and they've had to pay corporation tax on surpluses. And, we'll be having to spend millions of pounds in paying HMRC corporation tax over the years, which we never would have had to do if we kept it in-house. So I do have serious concerns about this.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Slade, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. We heard earlier on that there is a proposal, when a member probably asked the question about the position of the leader and the deputy leader on the board. The response we heard, and I may have heard it wrong, was that they're going to be coming off the board. What I find quite confusing then is that the business case clearly states that there will be 2 BCP representatives on the board, and that is the revised business case that we're approving tonight. So I'd be really interested to know whether the business case is wrong, whether that change has happened since, whether we're going to get another business case, because it does feel very much like what we've got here is a pack of cards, and everyone keeps throwing some extra cards, and then we spend a few months shuffling them around. There were 13 projects when this started. There are now 19, but there aren't 19, because quite a few of those projects have an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, and so on. And item 19 has 6 cross projects, and item 18 is 3 themes. So what we've got here is 20, 25, 30. Today, by tomorrow, it could be another 5. I think the best intention, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, like my colleagues, that this was set up with the best intention. No one is in any doubt that there is a lot to do. There is a lot of brilliant projects that the 3 councils had been wrestling with for a number of years and were struggling to find the resources to bring together. And perhaps this was a great idea, but I think it's gone way beyond great idea. It's now gone into something which is becoming rather murky, and I don't think it's affordable. I don't think it's fair. I think we have a situation where the people sitting in senior roles in this company are being paid way over council rates. They're getting huge bonuses, whilst other staff are actually not even getting a decent pay rise or are not being paid the same as their colleagues in another part of town.
So I have huge reservations about this. I'm really uncomfortable with some of the closing down of scrutiny that we've had. Some emails I've had from members of staff who say, oh, I don't like the fact that you're questioning things in public. We should be questioning things in public. This is a council organisation, and if the people who are running this organisation don't like to be scrutinised, they should go back to the private sector.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Anybody else? Councillor Iyengar.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think my concern about this organisation will be known and goes back some way. It won't be a surprise to people. I have to say, this arrangement, I don't quite know what it does. I got my head around it to understand the details of it. I don't sort of see the point of it. It introduces more complexity into the arrangement for what I can't see as any particular benefit. Project fees are being defined in this, but we're giving through the loan facility a bundle of cash so they can pay the monthly salaries. And then I'll suspect from that, it's not mentioned in here, that the actual cost will be packaged up and then put into the projects with the markup. And quite honestly, it does say cost plus in all of this. So in effect, without all that malarkey, it's cost plus that we're having, which could be achieved a lot more transparently than this. So there's another level of obfuscation in this as well. So that's on the financial thing. So kind of why do it? Because it's creating unnecessary niggle in all of this. The second thing is, and somewhat bluntly and maybe uncharitably, I went into the business plan and sections 2.1 and 2.2, the list of corporate progress and project progress. Forgive me, there was nothing in that long list that residents would recognise at all. It was internal things, internal stages, enabling acts, internal things, machinations within the team, nothing that I could stand up to residents and say, this has been achieved, did you see it? Or, you know, can you sort of imagine, yes, that's coming along the way? None of that whatsoever. So, I know things take time, so, you know, a year and a bit from now, but I don't think at this stage we've seen at all what should have been reasonably seen by this point in terms of actual progress, actual delivery, and most certainly transparency and visibility as well. I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Hilliard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I echo a lot of speakers tonight about the lack of transparency. Very few residents will understand what's going on here, and I think probably only 95% or slightly more of members in this chamber will understand what's going on in here. But for me, looking at section 3.7.1, the advanced delivery sites, so 5 sites have been disclosed in Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. And what we're hearing is that Future Places aims to bring a business case outlining a single option proposal for each to Council in autumn. Now, Christchurch Independents spoke to a couple of or 3 directors, I think back in October, September, about we want to be part of the consultation engagement of what's going on in Christchurch. I don't know the mechanism in Bournemouth and Poole, but I should imagine resident associations, other bodies would want to be engaged with the organisation, and to hear a report that one outline proposal will be coming in the next couple of months where ward councillors haven't been informed, resident associations haven't been informed, town councils, parish councils haven't been informed. It's really shocking and against the message we were told. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Councillor Rigby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like a lot of the other councillors here tonight have said, I don't want to repeat their points. I'm not a big fan of this paper. But what I do want to do is, if we're going to vote on it, I want to kind of try and at least tidy it up a little bit. So I'd like to propose an amendment to this paper, and it's quite a simple one. And it's something which I brought up in overview and scrutiny, and it relates to paragraph 13 in here, which I'll read it out. It says, upon successful approval of these business cases by the Council in line with the prevailing financial regulations, Future Places will be entitled to invoice the Council for their professional development advice and consequently receive payments. This income flow will enable Future Places to repay its debt if appropriate. Now, I think you might be guessing what 2 words I want to remove from this paragraph, and it's if appropriate, because I don't see a point at when a debt wouldn't be appropriate to repay. I think anyone taking out a debt should be repaying it, and this should be the same for future places. I did get a bit of an answer about this in overview and scrutiny, and they did say that maybe that does need rewording, and I wasn't really satisfied with the answer I got at the time, which is why I've brought it now that it's not been deleted. So if I can move that amendment, I'll look for someone to second me on that, please, just to remove the 2 words, if appropriate. Thank you. And can I just...
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Slade, second.
Thank you. Can I just say one more thing as well? It's just a question, actually, for the monitoring officer. At the end, it says about directors not being able to take part in the debate and vote on this. Is this the dispensation that they've been given for tonight on anything to do with this, the voting of this paper going through and amendments and so forth? Thank you.
Councillor Rigby, I think I understood your question correctly. So Councillors Miller and Broadhead have had a dispensation to be able to vote and participate in this paper tonight. Thank you. I just wanted to check something as well, if I may, Chairman.
Please do.
The amendment that Councillor Rigby is proposing, I don't see the words that you were talking about in the recommendation that's on the agenda. Can I just check with my Democratic Services colleagues that that amendment is pertaining to the recommendation that's being decided tonight? Could you bear with me, Chairman, while I check?
Please, yes, please. Members, do we need any further articulation of what Councillor Rigby has requested, or are you all aware of the 2 words that he's asking to be removed and in context? No, thank you. Yeah, so Mr. Jones will now deliver that to you. Yes, Councillor Rigby, Ms Ice would like to ask you a question.
Sorry, Councillor Rigby, it's just if we haven't had it in writing, we need to be absolutely clear. Can I ask you what page in the body of the report you're referring to, where those 2 words you want removed is on? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's page 168, and it's on paragraph 13, and it's the last 2 words on paragraph 13, which is if appropriate. So the sentence will just end, future places to repay its debt.
Yes, so do I understand correctly that you would be prepared to have the recommendation amended that the business plan be approved subject to the removal of those 2 words in that paragraph in the report?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask for some clarification?
Richard, are you able to articulate that?
Sorry, Chairman, before we go for the clarification, can I just read what I think it will then say in relation to the recommendations that are set out on the agenda? So I will read out B, because I think that's what the amendment is proposing. So it would be B, that the revised BCP Future Places Limited business plan attached to the report and the confidential Appendix A be approved subject to the deletion of the words, if appropriate, from paragraph 13 on page 168. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may just ask for clarification. That paragraph 13, I don't think is part of the business case, is it? It's the notes accompanying, the officer's notes accompanying the recommendation and explanation of the recommendations. So I'm struggling to see how that can be a recommendation, an amendment to that recommendations, because it's not part of the appendices either, as far as I can see. I may be wrong.
Ms. Ice.
Again, Chairman, unfortunately, this is rather difficult for officers to determine on the hoof. I don't know whether you want to pause for a moment while we have a look. On the face of it, it looks to me like it's an acceptable amendment, but of course, we'll need to look at it in detail if there are indications that it might not be.
We are at our 2 hour, past our 2 hour break, so should we declare a break? Councillor Broadhead, please.
Chairman, if I could make this tremendously easy for everybody, I think actually Councillor Green is right. The amendment that is being made to the business plan, which is actually what we're approving in this meeting, not the officer explanation, which is actually part of the cabinet paper. However, as we discuss this at overview and scrutiny, I actually completely agree with Councillor Rigby. The explanation we had from the financial team at the time was that those words were put in to give a little bit of flexibility if there was such a case where they'd already drawn down some money and they didn't need the money. So it was actually not about letting Future Places get away with paying its debt. Therefore, I'm quite happy to agree to remove those words because it was only there at the insistence of officers anyway, and also I get the impression it's going to be really, really hard to actually find the words to actually do it within full council.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Do you find that acceptable, Councillor Rigby?
Yeah, I'm happy to go with that if you're happy to get rid of them, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, members. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to pour cold water on this solution, but it may actually be entirely inappropriate.
Councillor Bartlett, you've already spoken. I'm sorry.
Have I?
Yes. So sorry. Thank you.
All right.
So could the proposer sum up, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Delighted to sum up. Mr. Chairman, if I may, you can always tell when it's approaching election season by some of the language that starts to be pulled out in this chamber. Something that I certainly don't use, and I think many of my colleagues here would never attempt to use, just because it just doesn't sit well with people watching from the outside. Murky, scam, fat cat pay, all of these things. What we've got here, as many of our colleagues have talked about, and what hasn't changed at all, is being recognised by people like Homes England as a stewardship, place-based approach at actually getting on with regeneration that hasn't happened before. That is absolutely there, and if you don't believe that, meet some of the team that we now have that have brought their expertise down to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole so we can actually start delivering on the things that we want to. We've heard talk again also about the lack of scrutiny. We had a scrutiny session on this as well, quite aside from the myths about scrutiny being eroded. Actually, more people are now involved in scrutiny and there are more scrutiny panels than there ever have been before. And again, I would just like to point out, and back to Councillor Iyengar's point, what's going on? Well, actually, Future Place has been up for 10 months now. It is something that obviously has to have its legs, but I'm delighted actually that within only the next few months at the end of summer the first 5 projects will be coming forward. I'll try and very briefly attack some of the questions that have been put to me. Councillor Bartlett talked about an increase in cost by this financial change. Well, actually it is the complete opposite. By moving to ability to capitalise these costs, revenue cost is always written off. This enables us to continually reinvest in regeneration in a way that simply wasn't possible before. That's why we're bringing this change. Actually, the company stays the same, but actually this enables us to go even further into the future. He also talks about massive levels of borrowing. Let's correct a myth. We're not giving a huge wad of money to Future Places. We're giving them the ability to draw down funds as they work at risk, and it is their risk, to enable this function to continue. Councillor Hadley, again, asked what is happening. As I mentioned, 5 projects are coming forward shortly, and as I mentioned, back to that risk, it is all at their risk. We only pay if we actually approve. And then finally, as I'd said at the beginning, if colleagues are really worried about the calibre of people within Future Places, which is our company, go and meet them. We've now got some of the best minds within the country working to achieve, and I think we need to stand in front of the ambition, the fact. We have loads of projects, and that was criticised. But you know the reason we've got loads of projects? We've got tremendous amounts of possibilities, tremendous amounts of regeneration opportunity. We are a region of over 400,000 people. We need to start acting like it, but we need to do it in a way that actually delivers the regeneration that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. If we could now move to the vote, please. For those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate clearly. We're going to go to...
Give the chance to count, just in case.
Those against, please. And abstentions, please. 3. That's carried 33 to 27 with 3 extensions. Thank you. At this point, I think I'd like to call a comfort break. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. I'd like to say 10 minutes, if I may. Possibly 15. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, members, for coming back so promptly. Item 7F, Cabinet 22nd of June 2022, minute number 19, cemetery regulations and cemetery fees harmonisation for BCP Council cemeteries. Councillor Anderson, I understand that you'll move the recommendations, and then for Councillor Mellor to second the move. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief on this. We have an executive summary. It's a fairly technical paper. It's basically explaining what we're trying to do to harmonise the three services across the conurbation. I will pick out one or two bits from it which I think are possibly relevant to people, just to give them some information. We're responsible for 9 cemeteries across the council, and those 9 cemeteries are all governed by 3 different sets of legacy rules, which are all out of date compared to industrial standards. Those in Christchurch, if we don't change them to harmonise them to the latest industry standard, could potentially lead to challenges to the council. Also, the Christchurch fees are by far the lowest ones we have, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to harmonise them so that actually we not necessarily making a profit, but actually are not making a loss on the fees that we charge for Christchurch burials. The other thing we need to point out is that we are running out of burial spaces in Poole and Christchurch. In fact, in Poole, we no longer have any virgin burial spaces. In Christchurch, we've had to close the cemetery for particular reasons, which I won't go into now, but I have talked to the ward councillors about that. And so most of the land we have, and it is enough land which is available for 12 years, is in Bournemouth. So we are looking for additional burial spaces, and I know that Councillor Phipps, amongst others, has suggested some useful places to look into. We are looking into those. But Poole and Christchurch do not have the land that we need, so we're looking into that. Another couple of items that I picked out from the paper, which I thought might be of interest to members, is that while we have a legal duty to maintain cemeteries for 75 years from the last burial, the private cemeteries have no compunction. They have no need to do that at all, so they can walk away from a cemetery at any time they like. So it's just useful for to let your residents know if they're concerned about our cemeteries at any stage. The other point that I picked up, which I wasn't really aware of, was that we as a council do not have a statutory duty to bury people, but we do have a statutory duty to make funeral arrangements for any person who dies within the boundaries of the council where relatives can't be found or can't pay or are unwilling to pay. But if we do bury someone in what used to be called a pauper's grave, they won't have any memorial stone or any marker apart from that which the council has to identify the grave. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Mellor, I understand you wish to second the move.
Will second and reserve right to speak. Thank you, Chair.
Members who'd like to contribute? Councillor Phipps, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'm very pleased that you mentioned the issue of Christchurch running out of space. And we have had the discussions, and thank you very much for that. And I know it's ongoing. I just wanted a little bit of clarification that when we had our discussions with my fellow ward councillor and myself, we did suggest an alternative location, well, an additional, should I say, location in Christchurch that might be suitable because it had already, or it was already coming forward when Christchurch was doing its local plan review. So that site had previously been available, and it may well be now, and I would just like to know if investigations are ongoing about that, because the recent local plan consultation that we had for the BCP local plan, there was no mention at all of any strategic site in the consultation for Christchurch. And I think it was possibly too late when we made that suggestion to put that in there. But I just wanted to be sure that you are looking at this, or this is being looked at, as some sort of a strategic site in Christchurch. I just think it's the same for all towns, really. People that have lived there in the town for a long time, they do want to be buried in their town. It is what people want, and it's not just for Christchurch. So really, it's just a little bit of clarification on that for a strategic site for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to the portfolio holder for mentioning the responsibility on the council for the provision of graves for those people who are unable to pay for their own facilities. But I wonder if we could get some clarification, firstly on, and it may, I don't expect them to have that information tonight, on the number of times that we've actually have to do that in a typical year, and also whether we actually do prepare them as burials or cremations, because it's always been talked about as a pauper's grave, but I've never heard of it as pauper's cremation. The other query I've got, in view of the forthcoming papers around the bereavement proposals for Paul, we do need to make the point that at the moment you can't be buried or cremated in Paul, which is absolutely a shocking state of affairs. And bearing in mind that Paul is a significantly sized town, that really has to be something we have to take seriously, and I would urge the portfolio holder to work hard to find a solution in Poole for the people of Poole. There's just one other thing I would like to comment on in the paper. Well, actually, it's two items. One is there's not very much in this paper about the provision of graves for people from other faiths. There's a brief mention about the Jewish condition, but I would have expected to see a bit more, bearing in mind we're becoming a much more diverse community in, where the provision is for those people who've got, whether it be Muslim or Jewish faiths or other things. So I would love to see some enhancement around that for the benefit of our residents. And finally, it would be helpful, and in my time of leading on bereavement a couple of years ago, if we could really make clear that for those people who have grave space in Poole, that we can still inter cremated remains in graves that are already purchased and occupied. It's not very clear in here, and I know that that would offer some reassurance to families that they know that's an option. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Any other members wish to? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just a point of clarification in the draft rules and regulations, page 254, paragraph 6.10 under litter, it just says at the end of the sentence, fly tipping query. I don't think that's quite what was intended there. My other question is, it says in the rules and regulations that cremated remains are not permitted to be scattered on top of any purchased or unpurchased grave or within any part of the cemetery. And I just wondered why that was, because surely if someone can't bury their loved one with perhaps a partner or parent, why we can't allow them to scatter their remains there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Anderson, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Phipps for her comments, and yes, we are looking into them. We're looking into any graves, any land that we can, actually, so I'm not going to refuse any point at land at all. And I may come back and have a chat with you afterwards, just to make sure we're both talking about the same place. Councillor Slade, thank you very much for your comments. You asked about the number of times per year of paupers, neither buried or cremated. Well, I don't know, but it's a really interesting question, so I will ask for that and find that out for you. Well, yes, there are burials in Poole. It's just there are no virgin graves, which means there are no graves that are not allocated and not have been used by families or have been sold and the lease has ended. That's what we mean by virgin graves. So there are graves, there just aren't many, and it's really becoming more and more difficult to get them. So we have some, but we have 12 years of burial across the conurbation. Most of those are in Bournemouth, and particularly in the Kinston Cemetery. Right. Graves to other faiths, sorry, yes. I know that the officers are have communications with both the Jewish and Muslim faiths, and I know that certainly the Kinston Cemetery, because I haven't been to the Poole cemeteries yet, it's something on my list to do. I haven't got there, but I do know that at Kinston Cemetery there is a Muslim area set aside and there's a Jewish area set aside. There's the same in the East Cemetery, and we do communicate with the faiths so people know that they're there and they're looked after them. There are certain members in here who will know about them because they talked to me and asked me about them. So it's well known amongst those face. LJ, thank you for pointing out one mistake I missed. I missed the one about the waste. The other one I've already spoken to the officers about, which is the one about the graves and the scattering of ashes. It's wrong. I'm getting it changed. Thank you,
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So we could progress to the vote, please. Welcome, Councillor Trent. Thank you. If we progress to the vote, please, for those in favour of the recommendation, please show clearly. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Item 7G, recommendations from the Leader of the Council, disposal of 21 Mill Lane. Councillor Miller, I understand that you will move the recommendations and then for Councillor Broadhead to second the move.
Yeah, thank you very much. Relatively brief on this. A little bit of background would have seen in the report. This is an ex-caretaker's house in the grounds of Baden-Powell School in Poole. It was first declared surplus by the school and then subsequently declared surplus by the corporate property group. Members across the chamber will not be surprised to hear that I'm not naturally keen for us to sell assets in our ownership unless there are compelling reasons to do so. So before bringing this paper, I did challenge that internally to see if there was another use we should be considering. But the clear answer has been that the best thing we can do in this scenario is effect a sale to fund capital projects at Baden-Powell Schools, St Peter's and other schools in our catchment, and while doing so bringing back a vacant home back into use. So I'm assured that a fully compliant process has been undertaken that included obtaining quotes from a variety of agents, and an open market process has then been conducted by the agent selected. Therefore, I am happy to move recommendations as per the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. And Councillor Broadhead, I understand you wish to...
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Happy to second this one. Again, as Councillor Mellor has pointed out, this has been in hand for some time now, over 2 years, that this disposal has been underway. Again, like him, we've explored all the ways in which we want to try and be investing in our properties. But in this circumstance in particular, because the money is going back into the local school, I do absolutely believe it's the right thing to do. And I'm sure that the Baden-Powell and St Peter's and the other schools that will benefit for this will be quite happy with that chunk of cash. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Members, anybody who wish to contribute to the debate on this? Councillor Barron.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not happy with some of the details in the confidential report. I was contacted by an officer with a link that wouldn't open. I wrote back to Democratic Services and I didn't hear anything else. So although it says I haven't raised an objection, I do now. The property is an extremely expensive area. It is within Lilliput catchment and of course Baden-Powell. I do feel that the price mentioned in the confidential report should not be accepted. I'm extremely worried there's only been one offer on the property and the property has only been marketed by one single agent. In my opinion, the council should have had the property on with two agents, not connected to each other, to ensure a fair price would be achieved without any question.
Councillor Barron, could I just offer you a word of advice? If you're going to go into more detailed commercial sensitive figures on the appendix, which you've already referred to.
No, I'm not going to.
Sorry?
I'm not going to mention the figures.
Okay, that's kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please continue.
No. Only that I'm not happy with the figure. I'm not going to mention what the figure is, Chairman. Thank you. One single. The house is slightly dated, but has great potential. There's a lot of land to the side for an integral garage with extra rooms above, subject to planning. The council could have easily have painted some walls within the property to make it look a little more attractive. Marketing a property with dark red walls inside with one agent is never going to end in a positive viewing. The report also doesn't state what commission the agent is charging. I understand the council disposing of the property if it isn't viable to rent or develop themselves, but not in this way. Finally, Chairman, I'm extremely surprised the agent has erected a sold board. This will clearly put off any potential buyers at a time where we haven't even agreed to sell it at that price. The board's up now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. Any other members wish to contribute to this debate? None have indicated. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pedevin.
Yes, I'm wondering why a perfectly good house, not huge but very adequate as a family home, is not being put to good use it's much needed use for social housing.
Thank you, Councillor Pedevin. Any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Miller, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for both of the members' comments. I did also ask that question, and the housing services have been consulted in terms of whether that property would have been of use, and then the balance decision was effectively that putting the money back into the school system was the best thing to do. But I did share that question myself. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Barron, for your comments. I think that there's just one technical point. I believe I've also had big trouble sometimes on modern government accessing and signing off reports. So there's something that I'm uncomfortable with there, and I will bring that up with again with Democratic, who try to assist me with the issue. I am assured of the process that we've gone through, and in terms of procurements. But there's one point that I think I'm moving to agree with you on around multiple agents, and there was an assumption internally around it would be more expensive for us to have two agents rather than one agent. It's not my experience of employing agents, so I will take that point back because usually pay on success. So I would take that point back and see if we can change our process going forward. I also agree that we should, as a council, as you'll see, actually by the future places. I don't want us to sell assets generally. I want us to be able to then move it forward, ourselves. That future places are doing that on our assets at scale. This isn't an asset, a single dwelling that is ready for those guys to look at. I think we should now, and the council brought us right. This has been going on for a couple of years. I think if it came forward now, I think we would look to see if we were able to do something internally through, Seascape or BBML, etc. So I appreciate it probably haven't gone far enough to persuade you to support this, but I will take up the points you've raised internally, and I am assured that this is the right thing to do. So we'll happily move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. So if we could progress to the vote, please. For those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Is that enough? Those against, please. And abstentions. That's carried 37 for, 5 against and 19 abstentions. Thank you. Brings us to agenda item 8, appointment of council representatives to Dorset Pension Fund Committee. Councillor Beasley, I understand that you will move the recommendations, then for Councillor Dove to second the move. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm moving a change to the Council's representation on Dorset County Pension Fund and changing Councillor Bobby Dove to be replaced by Councillor Toby Johnson, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Councillor Dove, I think you wish to second.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Any members wish to contribute here? Councillor Maitland, please. Rice, sorry.
Thank you. Of the 74,000 members of the Dorset Pension Fund, 70% are female. Yet the decision makers on this £3 billion pension fund committee are 100% male now, if this goes through. Something is fundamentally wrong that this is our reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Anyone else indicating contribute? Councillor Duff, please.
Thank you. I've enjoyed my time on the Dorset Pension Committee very much, and I thank Councillor BC for the opportunity to sit on it. It transpires that I'm probably not the right person to do so, and whilst we can have tokenism, it probably isn't appropriate in this place. So I'm very glad that Councillor Johnson is going to take my place. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dove. So we can progress to the vote, please. Those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, that's carried. Agenda item 9, notice of motion in accordance with procedure rule 9A, Barclays Paris Agreement. Councillor Rice, I call upon you to move your motion. Please call your motion.
Thank you. Just for a bit of clarification, I have sent an email around adjusting the motion.
I've given her a dispensation for access to the microphone, but thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue, Councillor.
I've asked permission to remain seated whilst speaking. Thank you. And it's been granted. Thank you. Yes, I would like clarification on how to proceed in terms of accepting the amendment that I've sent round by email, removing 2 words from the printed motion. Thank you.
The Monitoring Officer will answer that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Rice, as this is your motion and you're proposing the amendment before you have put the motion, you need to ask for it first to be seconded, and your seconder needs to approve the amendment, and then the council has to agree that you can amend the motion, and then it becomes the substantive motion on which we will debate. Is that clear? Does that make sense to you?
We'll see how I go.
So first of all, does your seconder agree to your amendment?
Lovely. Can I get a seconder for my amendment?
Councillor Rigby has indicated
Yeah, I'm happy to agree to
first.
second.
And then the chairman will ask the council whether or not they will agree that Councillor Rice can amend her motion.
Members, will we agree that Councillor... Thank you.
Then you proceed to the debate, Chair.
Thank you. Would members like to contribute to the debate, please? Councillor Green.
Sorry, Chair. Would you like me to speak out the motion?
Yes.
Put forward the motion. Thank you. BCP Council has declared a climate and ecological emergency. The towns of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are at significant risk from sea level rise caused by global heating. Financial institutes are able to influence future global heating through their policies, which should align with the Paris Agreement. We call on Barclays, as our banking provider and partner, to work to protect the inhabitants of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole by adopting climate policies that are acknowledged to be in keeping with the Paris Agreement. I do have some further words to say, just as part of the debate. When can I say those?
You can speak, sum up at the end.
So, Councillor Rice, if that's all you want to say in your proposal, you can sum up again at the end, just before the vote is taken. But you haven't used up all your allocated time, so I didn't know whether you wanted to...
Okay, lovely. I will carry on speaking. Thank you. At a recent debate with the Poole Charter Trustees, there was a concern regarding energy prices for BCP residents if Barclays are asked to move away from financing new gas and coal projects. Reassuringly, it has been shown by the World Economic Forum in July 2021 that renewable energies are now the cheapest form of energy globally, and so the reverse is true. Switching away from coal towards renewables will make energy cheaper for our residents. Unfortunately, Barclays is Europe's second largest provider of financing to top oil and gas expanders, that is, new gas and oil projects. There are 2 main issues with this. One, this is not needed, since renewable energy projects are able to provide reliable energy sources, and they will be pushing up energy prices for our residents. And 2, this is contrary to the evidence in the Paris Agreement, whereby carbon emissions need to reduce dramatically, and the first part of that is to stop expansion of oil and gas, let alone start to decrease existing supplies. Parts of Barclays' policies allow for global warming of 4 degrees. That means a sea level rise of 4 to 10 metres. As you can imagine, this will have significant impacts on whether we have a beach anymore, how much of our cliff is eroded, and how much of Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch is below the annual flood level, and the severe impacts on residents as a result. We put roughly £7 to £8 million through, £700 to £800 million through Barclays Bank per year in providing all of our services as BCP Council. We would like to ensure that this is being used to protect our residents, not cause flooding in the years to come. Therefore, as a council, as said in the motion, we call on Barclays to work to protect inhabitants of Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch by adopting climate policies that are acknowledged to be in keeping with the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Rigby, I understand you wish to second the motion, please.
Yeah, Chair, I'm really happy to second the motion. I think this is a fairly straightforward motion, really, to ask one of our partners who we work with to come forward and sort of meet the same commitments which we're making towards our 2030 zero carbon targets and our climate and ecological emergency. I know that our procurement processes throughout the council are looking at working with people who are setting similar targets to us, and this should be something which is being undertaken by everyone who we're working with now and in the future. So this kind of motion to ask our bank to come with us on this journey, I think is brilliant. And I just want to say I appreciate speaking to Councillor Green earlier, where we discussed this motion and got to a point where we're quite agreeable on it. And I hope everyone will support it this evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Any members wish to contribute to Councillor Green? Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Council has declared a climate and ecological emergency, and I think it would be quite inconsistent if we did not expect our partners to produce policies which are in line with the Paris Agreement accordingly. Particularly with them being our partner, I feel it's right. In fact, I think it's probably our duty that we explain to them that this is what we expect. I did have a slight fear when the motion was first put forward that there would be additional demands on our climate team, which is working extremely hard at the moment and I think achieving substantially already. And so that's why we spoke about the opportunity to take out those two words, which would mean that the obligation is there on Barclays, but there is no obligation on our own climate team to have to try and take time out of the work that they're doing at the moment. So I'm very grateful to the proposer and the seconder for agreeing with that. I will be supporting it, and I very much hope that everybody else will do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very pleased actually that the portfolio holder supports this, because I think it's really important for our 2050 targets about the wider BCP area, and you know, we focus initially on what we can control ourselves as council. That's a very small proportion of the overall load. But of course, Barclays, and particularly their international operation, which is still in the BCP, although it's moved out of Barclays House, has a very wide reach in terms of the impact globally and the opportunity they have with customers like us stepping forward and saying, no, we really are serious about this, not least because of the impacts on our own residents in this area, as Councillor Rice has outlined. So I'm very pleased with this, and I do hope that other members will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any other members wish to? So can I ask Councillor Rice to sum up, please?
Just to say I'm very pleased to hear the support of the portfolio holder and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, can we progress to the vote, please, for those in favour? All please indicate. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. There's the motion B, fair trade. Councillor Rigby, I call upon you to move the motion on behalf of Councillor Bull in his absence. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm busy tonight, but this was originally brought by Councillor Bull, who can't be here this evening because of COVID, unfortunately. I don't want to speak too much on this motion. I'm not going to read it out fully, but I want to thank the seconder, Jackie Edwards, from the cross-party working that's been going into this as well. And it's more a motion of a little bit of housekeeping, really. I'm just going to read a few words that Councillor Bull's sent over to me. Just to say that when we're adopting fair trade standards, it's ensuring fairer terms of trade between farmers and buyers, protecting workers' rights, providing the framework for producers to build thriving farms and organisations, and for shoppers it means high quality and ethically produced products. The goal of the fair trade movement is to ensure that all produce from farming is paid for fairly. The price of farm goods is deemed fair by the fair trade movement, but it allows the farmers and producers to enjoy a decent quality of life. The principles are it's trade, not aid. People should be empowered to improve their circumstances through trade rather than being reliant on charity from richer countries. All producers are entitled to safe and dignified working conditions, free from discrimination of any kind, and to be considered fair trade, transactions must benefit all parties. Trading arrangements should be based on financial partnerships, trust and mutual growth. Like I said, this is a bit of housekeeping. Previously, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole councils had individually passed similar motions. I believe Bournemouth and Christchurch was in 2014 and Poole in 2016. But with the merger, these have lapsed, hence bringing this motion forward, and I hope everyone will be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Before I ask Councillor Edwards, who's proposing to second the motion, one of our members has had to leave with heat exhaustion. For those of you who are not hydrating, if you'd like another break, I would happily allow you one if you're not already drinking, but gentlemen, you may remove your jackets. For those who are wearing ties, please keep them on because it's such a treat. We want you all to be safe and healthy, so please don't push yourself beyond endurance. And I bet you all wish you brought a fan with you now, don't you? Councillor Edwards, I understand you wish to second the motion. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to second this motion for BCP Council to use fair trade products wherever possible. Fair trade can bring a positive impact on our everyday choices by protecting standards such as the production of the food we eat and drink. It ensures workers get a fair price with safer working conditions, and that is something we should all support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any members wish to contribute to this? No? Okay. Councillor Rigby, can I ask you to reply to the debate?
Not a lot to reply to, Chair. I'm happy to go to the vote.
Thank you. Can we progress to acceptance of this motion, please? Those please indicate. Great, thank you. Thank you, members. Brings us to agenda item 10, questions from councillors. For this council meeting, we have a number of questions from councillors, and I'm obliged to keep this section of the meeting to 30 minutes in accordance with the Constitution. Supplementary questions are available for councillors to respond directly to the reply the portfolio holder has afforded them, but these questions must be indeed questions, not statements, and emanate from the reply just given. I will stop any further dialogue if it does not bring further clarity directly to the issue or does not relate to the subject matter of the original question. In addition, as previously agreed by the Council, the time limit for asking a question is 3 minutes. Councillor Dedman, I understand that you have a question to put to Councillor Dove on Jesmond Wood.
Councillor Dove. Yes, thank you. I do have a question. Sorry. I can't look at Councillor Dove and read my question. This is about Jesmond Wood, which is in Highcliffe, and last week there was wholesale destruction of the habitat of Jesmond Wood in Highcliffe, and it's a treasured area of green and established woodland, and the residents really highly value it. We've been told by the developer that this was to facilitate the pegging out for the plans he recently put into our BCP planning office for housing. To pursue this aim, the developer has put in bulldozers and devastated the whole area. Trees, grasses, bushes, all removed, and this has devastated the wildlife which was previously there in abundance. Jesmond Wood is now a pitiful sight, a wasteland, where before there was life, and our residents are appalled. It's an environmental disaster. Can you tell me what requests were made by BCP Planning Department before Mr Bulstrode caused the land to be cleared last week? I'm not sure that this is Councillor Dove, but, you know, go ahead, Councillor.
I can speak to you as the portfolio holder for planning operations.
Councillor Dove, if you can reply. That's fine. No, it's fine. Please, continue.
I'm just extremely keen to ensure that we represent the planning department appropriately. Thank you. And thank you for the question. I was very disappointed to see the extent of clearance undertaken at Jesmond Wood. And for the avoidance of doubt, the BCP planning department has never asked for, suggested or endorsed any clearance that should take place at the site. The planning department requested only that some plots were pegged out to further assess impacts on protected trees. Pegging out is a common practice. There are many ways to do this, and it's appropriate to consider on sites such as Jesmond Wood, where there are many protected trees that could be affected by the development. There are many ways to peg out a site which would not result in the extent of clearance seen on this occasion. At no point is any part of this request was there suggestion that the planning department would support clearance in order for the pegging out to happen. The prospective developer of the site, therefore, has made the decision to undertake clearance of their own volition. I'm really disappointed that the developer has linked the request for pegging for the opportunity to clear this, and at no stage has the planning department requested any clearance to take place. Officers within the council are currently assisting the police fully into their separate investigation into the matter, and the planning department also writing to the developer to remind him, as a responsible landowner, to ensure that this site is managed in a way that reflects its status as a sensitive location with high amenity value to both local residents and to the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Councillor Dedman, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Councillor Dove. That was very clear, and I'm glad to hear your sentiments. But my supplementary would be that has the council assessed the environmental damage which has been caused by the bulldozers? Have we made an assessment, and if so, can you let me know what it is?
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Councillor Dove.
Thank you. Yes, there has been a full assessment, and it has transpires that no planning breaches have been have occurred, and as such, none of the trees with TPOs have been brought down.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Councillor Pedevin, I understand you have a question to put to the Leader of the Council on behalf of Councillor Trent. I'm not sure whether...
As Councillor Trent is now here, the arrangement was that if he were here, he would ask...
Well, he is here, and I'd like to invite him to ask his question. Councillor Trent, Mr Mayor, on the Poole Civic Centre. Thank you, Councillor Trent. I'm glad you were able to put off your hospital appointment to join us. Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm very glad to see you here, Councillor Trent. The Council decision to retain a vertical slice of Poole Civic Centre that encompasses the principal listed and heritage elements for the purposes of accommodating the coroner and mayoralty functions remains in place. The project has not been shelved, and the budget remains as an approved element within the Council's capital programme. Notwithstanding this, since the decision was made to retain this vertical slice, an opportunity to consider a hotel option for the wider civic site has come forward. The Council's Future Places team have been exploring the potential for this option through further investigations, including soft market testing. If that work does support a case for changing the extant decision, the appropriate processes will then be followed. It is currently anticipated that Cabinet will receive a further update on this matter in the autumn. In the meantime, the project is simply on hold whilst the feasibility work is concluded. With respect to the safety and preservation of the building, appropriate measures are in place to maintain its security whilst its future is determined. Furthermore, regardless of the outcome of the ongoing feasibility work, the building's listed status will ensure that its important architectural contribution to Pool's landscape will be maintained for the future. And I will just add, preservation of historical rooms has been made abundantly clear to future places. It is something that absolutely must be maintained and is a non-negotiable red line, which I will point out wouldn't have been the case under the Lib Dem-led Unity Alliance administration. So I'm happy to put, you couldn't find it on Facebook, but I'm more than happy to say it again now. So I'm happy to put once again on the record that this administration will not be selling Pool Civic as part of a panicked fire sale of assets that we inherited from the Lib Dem Unity Alliance, who were planning on selling off the Civic Centre from the paper I inherited from Councillor Slade.
Councillor Trent, if you would like to ask a supplementary question, could I just ask you to move to your neighbour's microphone, because that mic is not fully coming through on the live stream.
Right. Yeah.
I'll just check with Mr. Jones that that's coming through.
Yeah. I find the answer really peculiar, and it just kind of chucks some old turkeys out that haven't got much basis in truth. Why could you not have asked to meet Pool Charter trustees, who are guardians of Pool's history and heritage, and given them the reassurance, if that's what we've just received, you have given us this evening? Why are these things being kept from those who have a right and duty to know? I hope you can explain that, please.
Yeah, I'm happy, Tony. First, two parts to that question. One part was questioning of truth. I can't understand, I honestly don't understand that, because everything I've said is absolutely factual. The decision is the decision. We're still going ahead with it. What we're doing at the moment is looking at other options, and so we should look at other options. So that is factually correct. So why haven't I engaged with Pool Charter Trustees? More than happy to. If you'd like to sit down, if you'd like to invite me to a meeting, Mr. Mayor of Pool, I'll be delighted to come to it. And I do also, pardon me? I'm well aware of that. I said if the Mayor would like to invite me to a meeting, I'd be delighted to. Thank you very much for pointing out I'm a Pool Charter Trustee member, which is why I was so. Which is why I was so pleased that we were able to take control of this administration, so we could stop your fire sale, so we can retain that building for future generations. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think that plan was already in place, the vertical slice, but I will say here and now that I am happy to invite the Leader of the Council to maybe...
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I muted myself.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
job. Councillor Bartlett, I understand that you have a question to put to the Leader of the Council on full Council decisions.
Thank you, Chair. Does the Leader agree with me that where the Constitution requires a decision to be made by full Council, that such a decision, when made, can only be rescinded or altered by a subsequent full Council decision unless this is agreed as part of the original decision?
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Bartlett. Notwithstanding statutory requirements or constitutional provisions, including, for example, matters of urgency, I do agree with your assumption regarding the decision-making process as outlined. Formal key decisions, as outlined in the Constitution, can only be taken by full Council. Circumstances often change after decisions have been taken, but any changes that alter a key decision still have to pass through the relevant gateways.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Bartlett, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Chair. Yeah, given the answer you get and the previous, taking into account the previous the question from Councillor Trent, which is an example of what I was going to raise, where a decision had been apparently rescinded or changed or altered without consultation. I'd like to raise the one of the Winter Gardens, which has been in work for 7 years and now has been appears to have been cancelled, and is evidenced by the BCP posting an £11 million loss in its account, and BCP actually contributing a £5 million provision to that loss. which gives an indication that the project has been stopped, and indeed the site is now being marketed for temporary use, and we're told that the alternative option is now a redevelopment of the BIC, which will encompass the Winter Garden site as well. This is a major programme which has been in work for such a long time, and yet it seems to have been changed without any real discussion with the council.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Mellor, would you like?
Absolutely happy to do that. Just to be clear, to reiterate, I do agree with you about, there's obviously a formal process to go through to change decisions. Specifically in terms of the Winter Garden, my understanding of that report is we approved the ability to borrow. We didn't say we were, absolutely that's the only option. We would go ahead with it. You also talked about the £5 million loss. It's not a loss, it's a provision. And that's just a prudent way of accounting for it. More importantly, I think in terms of the spirit of the discussion, we think that it's worth trying to get the most out of our assets, get the most out of our place. And if we bring forward a team like Future Places, which I'll reiterate again after the debate we had, are the leaders in regeneration across the country. That's not us saying that. That is Sir Peter Freeman, the chairman of Homes England. It's Michael Gove, lauding them on their stewardship programme. These are people absolutely, able to. We should listen to them, and then if we want to change something, we'll bring it back and have a discussion, and it'll be this chamber who ultimately makes the decision. But also, if you want to sit down and have a conversation with me, the deputy leader, or Future Places about Paul Civic, about the Winter Gardens, delighted to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Evans, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Mark Anderson on the provision of a public bench.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier this year, I met with members of the Parkstone branch of the Rotary Club. The club celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2021 and wanted to provide a bench on the pavement outside Poole Hospital on the Longfleet Road side to commemorate this. They have contacted BCP Council to try to arrange this on numerous occasions to no avail. When I chased up the matter on their behalf, I received the following response from an officer. Whilst I understand the need for a bench outside the hospital, unfortunately I'm unable to deal with your inquiry as the bench scheme is currently closed to new inquiries and is under review to amalgamate the 3 policies to determine a single harmonised policy. This is completely unacceptable. Having somewhere to sit is important for those with frailty and reduced mobility. It gives people a place to wait and encourages walking by ensuring a rest stop is available. If residents and charities are willing to supply benches in suitable public spaces, surely the Council should be enabling this to happen as quickly as possible. Please can the portfolio holder advise when the policies will be harmonised, the scheme reopened, and how long it will take to deal with the backlog? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Anderson, please, to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor L.J. Evans for her question. We appreciate the impact the delays in launching the BCP commemorative bench programme is having to a small number of interested parties. The service has corresponded directly with the Rotary Club in detail and explained other options currently available at this time. It is very much our commitment to launch a BCP service. Indeed, it has been the subject of a work stream from our Future Parks Accelerator programme, whereby the service has been exploring future wider commemorative package opportunities, such as trees, plaques, benches, planters, donations to public buildings, e.g. pavilions, the Avery, open space improvements, etc. Specifically with reference to the commemorative benches, a key requirement is the need to replace the 3 legal agreements, all with different VAT tax implications, different agreement lengths, multiple bench options and pricing structures to provide a single unified offer across the conurbation for all. Furthermore, there is a need to address the legacy of existing benches that are now out of date, correspondence addresses to confirm ongoing funding renewal commitments for maintenance, to A, ensure maintenance income budgets are sufficient for the task, and B, to determine locations re-available for interested parties. We are endeavouring to relaunch by the end of 2022, and I will make sure that we are in contact with anyone who is asked to be kept updated on the scheme, and I can assure L.J. Evans that I will be doing that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Evans, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Councillor Burton, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Nicola Green on the Cleaner, Greener, Safer campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, my residents often comment to me about the condition of the walkways and paths within the ward. I believe we can all agree that having a well-maintained and visually pleasing walkways promotes active travel and a pride in the area. Could the portfolio holder please tell me what impact the Cleaner, Greener, Safer campaign that went to Cabinet 29th December 21 has on footpaths and pavements, alleyways so far this year?
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank Councillor Burton for his question, which couldn't be more pertinent at this time of year, with vegetation growing almost in front of our eyes. There's always a tension between those who wish to see our verges and walkways trimmed to Bowling Green level and those who wish nature to have an entirely free hand. And I find the general consensus sits that the sensible approach lies somewhere between the two, depending on the specific locality. I'm also very grateful to Councillor Burton for making the explicit link between a well-maintained and safe road and footway network and encouraging cycling and walking. BCP's 780 miles of roads and footpaths are inspected by our highways inspectors to determine the degree of risk and therefore an appropriate response for defects. The Council has a twice-yearly weed treatment programme for roads and footpaths, with the first treatment cycle nearing completion. When treated, weeds don't die back straight away and it can take several weeks for the full effect to be seen, and the herbicide will only treat the green weeds which are growing at the time of treatment. Following on from rules which govern the use of herbicide and in keeping with the declaration of the climate emergency, the Council now uses less aggressive methods than in the past, and this necessarily impacts on how many weeds continue to grow. Our grass cutting policy has developed well beyond the one-size-fits-all approach of the past and is now informed by feedback from residents and park and playground users. You will see that some areas are left to grow for biodiversity gain, but the margins mowed, whereas areas near playground and high footfall are kept shorter. Our grass cutting team has been supplemented by 4 new members of staff, and we have funded and are looking to recruit another 6. They're currently cutting the grass and will be moving on to clearing vegetation once the season finishes. In the event, Councillor Burton, that you or your residents in Bearwood and Merley have a concern about any particular road, verge or footpath, I would urge you to report it via the link I'll circulate via Democratic Services. In terms more generally of the Cleaner, Greener, Safer pilots in the 3 town centres, significant work has been started and continues, working with our 3 business improvement districts to target deep cleansing, increased numbers of cleansing operatives, deployment of CSAS officers, replacement litter bins, repainting of street furniture and road linings, and the provision of floral painting planters. The impact on our town centres has been noticed by many residents and visitors, and we're ambitious to roll out these improvements into our district centres once resources and staffing allow, in addition to the business as usual which I set out above. We're also working with volunteers and communities to support council action so that everyone can play a part in keeping our environment clean, green and safe. The campaign is supported by a wide range of volunteers, which we hope will continue to grow and enhance supported community-led action. And Councillor Burton, if you have any further questions, I'm sure I or Councillor Anderson would be very happy to come to visit your ward. Having traversed it on my bicycle today, I've picked out some particular favourites, but very happy to respond to you in more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Burton, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Chair, if that's possible. Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. It provides a lot of reassurance. And actually, you've touched on some of the concerns that my residents have. I was particularly thinking about the vegetation reduction and whether that means that it's an increased use of herbicides, particularly organophosphorus compounds like glyphosate, and how I can explain to my residents who understand that cleaner it is, but greener and safer. I'd like to explain that to them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Green.
If I may just respond quite generally to that, I know that the Council has changed some of its chemicals, but I'll give you a very specific answer if I may take further advice.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Thank you. Councillor Slade, I understand you have a question to put to the Leader of the Council on Barclays House.
Thank you, Chair. It was reported on 6th of May 2022 that the developer Fortitudo had secured planning permission to demolish Barclays House. It was revealed on the 2nd of June 2022 that BCP Council had entered an exclusivity period to purchase the site, and on 8th of June the figure of £17 million was reported as the bid from the Council almost 3 times higher than the bid made by the local developer. Councillors were advised on the 24th of June that the Chief Executive had signed an officer decision to commit almost 200,000 in due diligence for surveys and valuations of the site. Can the leader please advise on what date the Council started to negotiate on the site, on what date the offer was made, why it took at least 3 weeks from the offer being publicised for the decision to spend the money to be shared with elected members, and why the Council would be considering use of the site for Council offices when we are just completing a multi-million-pound renovation project on the offices in Bournemouth to site our offices here.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Mellor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the question. Upon receipt of the marketing details, an asset investment panel meeting was held on the 27th of April to discuss this opportunity and consider the strategic regeneration and operational uses it could support. Barclays sought final indicative non-binding expressions of interest by 13th of May 22. It was noted that the timescales were very tight and would only allow limited diligence to be carried out before the indicative offers were to be submitted, and therefore long-term uses were only considered in principle, including the possible opportunity to relocate our main administration functions to the building, given its proximity to the railway station and other public transport routes. However, given the timescales and the nature of the outline indicative expressions of interest, no formal decisions were taken or sought regarding long-term uses beyond that indicative discussion. As part of the process, BCP Council requested a period of exclusivity to give the opportunity far more detailed consideration. The delay in the publishing of the officer's decision record was because we were waiting to get the exclusivity agreement signed with Barclays before we committed the budget to the due diligence. This was to mitigate the risk of Barclays continuing to negotiate with other third parties and putting us at greater risk of abortive costs. The exclusivity period will enable the Council to complete the due diligence, finalise any offer should it be considered appropriate to proceed, and seek the necessary Cabinet and Council approvals by the 10th of November 22. Any formal decision to proceed with this acquisition would require a series of formal decisions which would need to be taken through the appropriate routes, including Cabinet and Council meetings. It is also worth highlighting that at the point of submitting the indicative non-binding expression of interest, BCP Council were obviously not aware of other parties' interest or their offers, and Barclays have not formally disclosed any other offers that were received. Any discussion of alternative offers is therefore speculation, as we do not know the amounts put forward as expressions of interest or any conditionality that was attached to them. Thank you.
Councillor Mellor. Councillor Slade, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. It's interesting that the leader repeats the comment about it being speculation when the developer has actually confirmed the amount is around a third of the bid made by BCP. So if I know that, surely they did too, even if they didn't at the time. The figure that's been indicatively bid by BCP is not dissimilar to the sum paid for Holes Bay, a site that had stalled in public ownership and where the council invested to ensure that progress was unlocked. Does the leader not agree that it is rather an odd position for a local authority to be competing with the private sector when there is other interest in a site in property development, so driving prices up at a time when property prices are already way outside the reach of local people?
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You point about the developer that you've put in the frame there. Well, there were multiple people who were interested and were having discussions with Barclays. So you talk about one, and it's an assumption. So I think what I said first does stand. There was many other EOIs. You talk about Holes Bay. So what we wanted to do was, rather than deliver precisely nothing, which is what you delivered in terms of regeneration, we wanted to get the talent and the people, the investment. Our first budget put £1.75 million extra into regeneration because you hadn't got enough in it. And then all you've managed to do was put £10 million, well, around about £10 million back to Homes England. So what we're doing in terms of was put future places, fund them properly, get the best talent in the country out there so that we can look at opportunities like the Barclays site. And then if you look at regeneration more generally, well, what's that a lot about? And what's our borrowing potential cap all about? Housing. Exactly housing, the thing you're saying we need to do. So I bluntly and quite happily couldn't disagree with you anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. Councillor Dedman, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Anderson on the Olympic Legacy Path, Muddyford Quay to Avon Beach. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wasn't sure we'd get this far. Yes, it's the Olympic Legacy Path in Mudderford Quay to Avon Beach. And this was from the 2012 Olympics held in Great Britain, and the sailing teams trained on Gundamore Beach, which was adapted to facilitate their access. And at that time, as a legacy to thank Christchurch residents, funding was given for a path between the quay and Avon Beach, which allowed people to walk actually on the beach, but on hard standing, and enjoy the sea and the sand with the health benefits of the ozone and the closest to the water, rather than on the sea defence path, which has a substantial high wall on the sea side. Since 2020, the path has not been cleared or swept by BCP Council. It's become covered with sand, and it doesn't fulfil the purpose of the Olympic legacy, which was to provide health-giving walks for our community, especially those who need to come to the beach via wheeled buggies or with children in pushchairs. There's now no way of getting them onto the beach path for an invigorating walk in the way that had been intended. Our community, and I can tell you I've had lots and lots of input on this, are finding this very concerning. So can you tell me what the plan is for maintaining our Avon Beach Olympic legacy path in future?
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank Councillor Dedman for her question. Unfortunately, I'm not King Canute. I can't hold back the tide. This path was positioned in an area that is impossible to maintain. It was constantly undermined and eroded or covered in sand. The decision was taken to start to remove it on the 19th of December 2019, as the path had become a health and safety hazard, with the reinforcement being exposed. The cost of the work on Gundamore Path in 2019 alone was £18,485. The reality is that there is an excellent access to the adjacent beaches, as the wall in question is not a long one. So trying to keep a structure that is not sustainable in that position isn't viable. This path is one of a very small part of the coastal protection work that the FSM team are currently working on along the whole of the Christchurch Bay area and harbour. To get an understanding of the history of the path, I talked to some of the Christchurch staff who were involved in the path. Here are a few of their responses. The path was created in September/October 2009 and extended tied into the Gundamore seawall apron in February 2010. Its construction was of wood formwork tied with steel rod reinforcements on top of a layer of hardcore with crushed limestone top surface. Prior to BCP, the Christchurch beaches and beach paths rarely received any mechanical cleaning / intervention. Christchurch Council did not have ready access to tractor sweepers as BCP Council now have with seafront services. It would also be hard to sweep a crushed limestone path on a sand shingle beach. Following multiple attempts to protect and repair the path was finally cut back and the undermined sections removed and made safe on the 19th of December 2019. And comments from another member of staff. The path was regularly getting damaged, needing repairs. There was even an attempt to place rock armour in front of it to protect from wave attack. The reality is that this design was only really suitable as a temporary measure for the Olympics and would never last any length of time. A couple of years ago, the damage was so bad that steel reinforcement was completely exposed and bent up so that it presented a significant health and safety hazard. Therefore, the decision was made to remove it, which we'd have had to do even if replacing it. If the path is to be replaced, it would not be suitable to place a slab on top of a beach crest as was done before, otherwise it would be in the same position of having to constantly repair it, as well as a regular spiking hazard. In an environment where wave attack is present, we needed to build significant structures instead, which would cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. The question is, why would you want that when there is a perfectly good path behind and excellent access for wheelchair users just along the coast in a safe environment? The beach crest in that location is dynamic, so unsuitable for path surfacing, and a properly founded structure is constructed to place a path on top. And a final comment. Yeah, that was a constant battle for us. We cleared it a couple of times by hand, which wasn't easy, as it's crushed limestone path. Ben Feely did some good work done there, but the expectations always exceeded reality. It was also really vulnerable to wave erosion at the western Mudford end. There were timber revetments holding the path in place, which routinely had to be replaced, So I don't think a harder surface would last much longer anyway.
Councillor Anderson.
The irony was that it was intended as an Olympic legacy site if we had been chosen to host one of the minor countries' sailing teams. And we got funding to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Chairman, I really do need to finish this, because if I don't, it doesn't fit with the answer that has been asked. Well, in that case, Chairman, I can't answer this question. But sorry, Chairman, I do need to. The whole point of this question is this answer. Is the information
Councillor
here.
Anderson, I will allow you to. It must be very important. So please
Thank you,
deliver it
Chairman.
as fast as you can.
Okay. So, just to recap. Well, I just need to finish the sentence, Chairman. I will finish the sentence. Right. So, it was to host one of the minor countries' sailing teams, and we got funding to support it, but we didn't get chosen. As it stands today, the prescribed easy access route from Muddyford Quay to Avon is along the promenade behind the wave wall, which is a tarmac surface and well protected. The parallel beach...
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. That's fine.
Chairman,
Councillor Dedman, do you have a supplementary question, please? Because she has a supplementary question. Please accommodate those important facts in the response. Councillor Dedman, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm really grateful to the Councillor for that very long explanation. However, as you might understand, I do disagree with it totally. You're talking about one end of the path, not the end that I'm talking about, which is the Gundymore end.
This should be a question, Councillor Dedman, please, on the information you've been given.
Can I say to my residents that you are not even going to sweep the Gundymore end, which is all in place, perfectly fine. All we need is somebody to come along with a broom and sweep it.
So the question is, please sweep the path, Councillor Anderson. Your response, please.
Chairman, the path was closed and removed in 2019, December 2019. That was not under our administration. That was under the UA administration, and it was under Councillor Rice's portfolio. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I do love a bit of drama. Right, agenda item 11, urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. I'll ask the monitoring officer to advise members of any urgent decisions taken.
Thank you, Chairman. There have been no urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in the last period. Thank you.
So at this opportunity, I would close the meeting. Thank you, members, indeed. Thank you.